KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan Moriarty 117. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How are you, my friend?
Here's my pensive. I don't know why I'm doing pensive. Double-fisted pensive?
Double-fisted pensive?
Ooh,
that's almost like you're forlorn.
Yeah, that's no good. Let's just do one. Hello. It's so nice to see you, dude. Oh, shit. You know what I forgot? Listen. Oh, for you, all you ASMR fans out there, you might like this. Now it's going to explode all over me. Should we do it on mic?
Yeah, do it. Okay.
Oh, that's a good. That is a good sound.
That was perfect.
That's a good sound.
You should be a sound engineer.
You know what? I'll give you guys a little peek behind the podcasting curtain. I'm usually drinking like a Pellegrino, a Perrier, something like that for the pods, right? But I try to open it like an hour before because I don't want to be gassy. I don't want it to be too bubbly, right? When I'm talking, we're having a conversation, but I totally forgot. So
all good, my friend.
Yeah,
it's good to be here with you. It's good to see you. I like it. Is that a De La Soul is Dead shirt? What is that?
No, this is first one, 3 feet high.
Oh, 3 feet.
Yeah. Can't see it. Maybe if I pull it back a little bit.
Very nice. Love it.
You want to see the gun show as well?
Yeah. Are you working out?
No, but I think about it every day. I'm like, how do I, because I go for my walks, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, something like that, about 3 miles, 3.5 miles. And that's good. And my legs are in good shape, but my upper body, dude, I'm just,
I know.
You know what I mean? How do I integrate? I'm wondering, like, how do I integrate that into my day? You know, and the only thing I can think of is work your left arm out with like a 10-pound weight while I'm drawing. And I think it'll be really funny to be really built up on one side, but I'm not going to be the guy.
That would also require an incredible amount of attention and focus. I don't think you can do. It's like rubbing your belly and tapping your head. Like you can't do that.
I can't do that. Yeah, chewing gum and walking, forget it.
No. No one should be chewing gum anyway. It's disgusting.
How are you?
I'm good. I recommend just getting some free weights. I mean, that's what I did. You know,
how long do you go for each day?
20 minutes.
Oh, that's all.
Yeah,
and you look. That's a noticeable difference.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't have like any definition really, but that's my arm. I mean,
dude, it's a huge. I mean, it's a huge.
There it is. There it is. It's not great, but it's better than it was. You know,
Arnold.
Yeah, my legs are in great shape, but I want to get a little bit better up here. You know, I totally understand what you're saying. The workout, like I'm noticing like my wrist, like there's just definition. You'll love doing it because I noticed the difference. Like,
and you
really
feel different, like just the way you carry yourself, right? Like just your body feels a little different.
I've said that the unusual thing that lifting weights did for me was like it stretched my back out and straightened me up. Like I know the first time I lifted weights, I was like, holy shit.
Really?
Like, yeah, like you just because you're doing this thing, I don't know, like
doing.
I can't explain it.
Yeah.
I was telling someone on a recent podcast that we were talking about. I did a podcast called Body and Mind where I on Sacred Symbols Plus. It actually went up when we're recording this. Where I interviewed a guy about who's like doing this thing. It's actually a really cool idea. Infinite RPG. It's called Infinite RPG, and it's like a role playing game where you are. It's like your avatar, and so you're like building a character, and it's his like company.
Oh shit!
Which is pretty cool. And then I interviewed a guy in Australia does this thing called Headspace, which is like a positive role model, sort of like how do you use games responsibly and all that sort of thing. And
wait, Headspace is like a big thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, it is in Australia anyway, yeah. And
who's the guy you interviewed for that?
He's just one of the counselors there.
Oh, okay,
his name is Michael Pekin.
Okay. Well, that's cool.
So because I'm trying to, Cog and I did and I've said this before, so I know Sacred Symbols people like we get it. But Cog and I did an episode of Sacred Symbols Plus called Health is Wealth.
Yeah.
Where we just talked about like ourselves, like, you know, like our regimens and just trying to convince people, and people really liked that episode.
I love that.
And sometimes people just need a push. Like we were just saying, like, go to the eye doctor, go to the dentist, like put down the cheeseburger, at least sometimes. Don't drink the fourth beer. It's like, I get it.
Talking to myself, I'm the man in the mirror, man.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, you're colliding two worlds that rarely have anything to do with each other, I feel like, at least in conversation. And that's huge. You know, you're because we all think about these things, but we want to talk about Halo 3. We don't want to talk about working out.
No, I don't. I don't want to talk about the thing I will say about working out is that some people I'm very lucky to have a space in my house where I have a home gym, like a room that's just dedicated to the gym. It's like downstairs, right off the front door. It's
That's
supposed to be
great.
like a home office, I think.
Sure.
But we just put all our workout equipment in there, and I would never work out if I had to leave the house. But I must admit that I don't enjoy it. Like, I know some people really like it. I don't do it because I like to do it. I do it because it's good for you and it's good for your mind, and it's just like, just get through it. And then, for instance, on Sunday, football started. I fell asleep during the afternoon games for like 2 hours on the couch, and I woke up and it was too late for me to work out because we were about to eat dinner or whatever. I'm like, I felt like a lazy asshole. You just got to get through those things, and then. But I'm jealous of the people that are like, yeah, I fucking love it. I love working out. Like, I don't like working out. It sucks.
No, I don't either. It's true though.
Oh.
What is it about doing something we don't want to do that makes us feel good? Is it a discipline thing, knowing that we did something, or when we're resting later, we know we earned it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's
That's exactly right.
Little bit of something in all of that, I think.
That's what I try to do. Is I try to, I don't smoke joints until I smoke a couple joints a day, and I smoke them at night. But I do all my work, and then around 5:30 I'll start like getting into workout mode, and then at 7 or so I'll go and take a shower, and then we eat at 7:30, and then I'm off the clock.
Okay.
I'm like, I'm good. I feel good at that point.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good.
So I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it.
I like it, dude.
All right, my friends, good to be here with you today. I'm glad you're well. We're here to talk about Halo 3, the 2007 Xbox 360 game. And we both just recently beat it. Now, you asked me before we started. So for people that don't remember, if you listen to the Halo 2 conversation, you'll know that I stole the Red Letter Media idea of kind of introing they do movies, but introing like the review process by just kind of giving our thoughts. And Dagan asked if I did it this time, and I said I didn't, but he gave me a little extra time. He did it, and I gave me a little extra time. So I wrote a little 500-word thing as well to kind of set the stage for how we feel about Halo 3. So Dig, since you are into the idea, I figure let's let you go first. We'll ease into it. Shout out to Red Letter for the idea of doing this. I think this is a good way to set things up. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is kind of fun for me because I love to write, but I don't get to exercise those muscles very often, So this is kind of a fun little thing. I was thinking about this. So I was laughing at myself before I came on here with you. I had so many ideas for this, and I wanted to kind of sculpt it. Like, what am I going to do? All right, maybe I'll do a food thing and make it like a master chef type thing, and I'll cultivate the entire thing like that. But the way it came out is kind of erratic. It's kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different ideas. So I apologize for that. But don't be so. Listen, we can't all be the Gene Parks of the world, right?
Sure.
So, but I had a good time. Listen,
good. Yeah.
And it was a pleasure because this game is a pleasure. So, Kyle, let's kind of broach the conversation like this. Okay.
Please.
As Halo enters into trilogy territory, it's fun to look back and see how the franchise has cultivated so much success. With a rabid fan base, one of the most iconic heroes in all of video games, and Microsoft minting motherloads of money off the series, what is the magic ingredient bubbling at the bottom of this sci-fi shooter stew? Like the first two games before it, there's a lot to love about this third effort. But since we're celebrating a trilogy here, let's boil it down to 3 things for now. A rich, well-crafted story with thoughtful world building, a quality visual presentation, and voice actors that sound like they actually give a damn. Here's the thing, though. None of that would make a difference if we weren't having an amazing time with the resulting experience. High-quality building materials are nice, but we want to enjoy the finished house. When something is truly great, it can be difficult to articulate. Luckily, we have cliches for that, and so many of them seem to apply here. First of all, if it's not broken, don't fix it, and Bungie didn't. Plus, the best really do make it look easy, and creating a video game apparently is no exception. And since it's a 3 thing, I'll just add one more obvious one here. Third time's a charm. In this case, I believe 3 really is the magic number. Even with so much to love about this third Halo game, it all boils down to 3 simple letters. F-U-N. And that's it.
That's very well done.
Thank you, my friend.
Very well said. All right, here's what I wrote. For those that have been playing games for a long time, you'll remember that 2007 was an historic year across the industry. The orange box launched, as did BioShock and Mass Effect. God of War 2 came to PlayStation 2, the original Uncharted came to PS3, Super Mario Galaxy wowed us on the Wii, and Call of Duty became a true phenomenon with Modern Warfare. 2007 is also the year I started full-time at IGN, so indeed, that year was quite the experience, but what I remember most about that year is how Halo 3 completely took over the office. The longer I worked there, the more fractured people's playing behaviors became, but virtually everyone was all in on Halo 3, at least for a little bit, and except for me. See, I was very poor in 2007. I didn't own any current-gen consoles at that time, and I was also the lowest man on the totem pole, so I was obsessively focused on work. Halo 3 came and went, and I never played it until now. Here's what I love about it, and the other Halo games we played before, and indeed even the ones that are to come. They're all short. They don't require more than 8 or 10 hours at most to beat, and Halo 3 fits beautifully in that pocket. But let's be real. The gameplay, the gunplay, the movement, the variety of weapons, it all hits. But I'm also reminded of a famous Halo meme that Chris Raygun shared with me excitedly a few weeks ago, telling me I'd finally get it. It's 3 pictures of Master Chief next to each other for Halos 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 3 say something like, let's blow shit up. While the middle one and the one in the middle has unreadable text, like lines and lines of unreadable text. In other words, it's an indication of how much lore and storytelling was in Halo 2. That's what made me like it so much. Halo 3 lacks that. If it takes about 8 hours to beat, and it does, could we at least get 30 more minutes of further exposition, cutscenes, and more? The truth is, I wouldn't have picked up on the entire story if I didn't read a synopsis, and I'm not entirely sure how you're even supposed to know things that are taken for granted in the game. And no, I'm not reading any of the novels. You shouldn't have to. I know this is an online game first and foremost. I know it sold something insane, like 15 million copies on a console with an 80 million user install base. I just found it a little anticlimactic is all. Except for the dope ending that mimics the original Halo but doesn't suck like that ending sequel and sequence in Halo 1 did. The long and short is fun game, disappointing story, and I'm ready to see what else is out there in this universe. Why not take a little more time? Why does it have to be? See, I was saying this recently on a show because people, Dustin was trying to call me out saying like, well, you say, and I said it on this show before where 6 hours is too short. 10 hours for some things, 10 hours might be too long. 8 hours is kind of perfect, but you're really talking about major differences when you get to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 hours. And adding just a little more exposition, it felt like it really didn't need it, but the Halo 3 was made unlike Halo 2 without, trouble, without lack of money or time. So I don't know why they chose not to focus on the story very much. They wrapped it up. They set up Halo 4. And there are 2 Halos in between that we'll have to play in ODST and Reach, which is a prequel. ODST, I guess, is kind of a short continuation of Halo 3 in some other way. But those are basically my feelings on it. I think that Halo 2 is probably my favorite one of these 3. And I don't know why they abandoned or seemed to abandon what was so part of what was so cool about that, which was the story. Do you agree with that? That there seemed to be a lack of... Like, I didn't even know what was going on half the time, to be honest with you. I was reading like a very deep synopsis so that I went stage by stage after a while just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. And I'm like, I'm not entirely sure how I was supposed to know this about this story. Did you experience the same thing?
I'm glad it's not just me. I'm glad you had the same takeaway. In fact, I have the synopsis pulled up on the wiki page just to have as reference because I'm not sure I even get everything right now. I mean, this is so fun because, first of all, it's a rare opportunity for you and I to play something for the first time together because you usually have touched on all of these things. So this is a rare thing for KnockBack. And the second thing is, Kyle, that I think is so fun is that this was a rare experience for me in that, like you, I felt like it was too short. It was too brisk. I actually did something maybe for the first time in KnockBack history for myself where I played it all in one day and night. I mean, I started the night before, so technically it was over 2 days. But I could have easily gotten it done. That's because I was worried. I didn't think I'd get done in time. So that was a rare thing for me. Now it probably took me almost 11 hours, but that's very short for me. And by the time it ended, I just wanted more because I was having such a great time with it. And but I gotta say, man, this might be, in terms of fun and just having a great time, this might be my favorite. It's neck and neck because I loved all 3 of them. Really adored all 3 experiences. They were all a little different. But this one for me, just in terms of pound for pound fun, I think this was my favorite. And that's why it adds insult to injury, right? It pours a little salt in the wound of, man, I wish I could have had a couple more hours of this.
Yeah. It's almost, it walks that line where I don't want games to stick around too long, but I was surprised. I think I might have said this about Halo 2. I don't remember, but Master Chief Collection does this thing where, and you probably noticed this, where you go into the continuation of the campaigns and then it tells you how many stages you beat. Yeah. So I don't know. I went into so I beat like the first 3 stages one night, and then I think that was Saturday or Sunday night, and then like the next 3, and then I sat down to beat the rest of it, and I was like, where is the 11th stage? Like, I don't remember even playing an 11th stage. I don't know if that was like just the ending or whatever, but because I was, when you're doing that really fun driving part at the end, which I thought was awesome.
So good. It's
super cool, and you're with the arbiter, and you guys are kind of trying to escape, and you actually fail escaping, which is pretty cool and unexpected. I was surprised that was the last stage, because I was like, oh, I actually, I was playing, and I'm like, this is awesome, because they're echoing the original Halo, yes, but they're going to give you one more on foot mission at the end, and that's what I was kind of thinking. And then it just ended, and it went into the ending, and I started getting the achievements for beating it. I was like, oh, all right. But I mean, it's undeniably fun. It is really, really fun. I have a few gameplay quibbles with it, but overall, it's just, I mean, that's what glows with the game, and you can tell. And I know some people are disappointed that we're not talking about the online suites. I don't play online multiplayer games. I just don't do it, and I don't think I have anything valuable to say about it anyway. So I'm sorry about that. But, and I know that that's the star of the show for a lot of people, but how that segues into the campaign, I think is just wonderful. And it's kind of a bummer. I mean, I that's what I was saying in my write-up, was I was curious. I think we go to ODST next, and then Reach, and then 4. Whenever we get to those, I think we need a little bit of a break from Halo at this point, just so we can do some other stuff on the show. But I went and looked on how long to beat. Like, how long are all these games? And they're all short. Like, even when you go to Halo 5, I want to say, which was the second to last one, it's like 8 hours. Halo Reach, 8 hours. Halo ODST, 5 hours. I was like, where? It's so weird. I was expecting that jump, especially from Halo 4. I'm going to go to this, and it's going to say 16 hours or something like that. Like, more like a Resistance game, like the late Resistance games or whatever. But no, they're all just this short, which I can really appreciate. But I think that's part of them saying, this is not really why you're here anyway, or at least for most people. Most people are here for the online suite. Very similar to what they would appreciate. I mean, this is all the culmination of what Destiny would become when they would leave Microsoft.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah, the gameplay is really fun. I think it can go a little bit longer, but I don't need more gameplay. I really needed more. I mean, I would have loved more gameplay, but more exposition. Give me just 20 more minutes. And I think about the Halo 2 cutscenes, and I'm like, man, where are these? In Halo 3, there's just not a lot going on. And there's some really cool set pieces and really cool locations. You're literally in intergalactic space at the end, like not even in the galaxy. You're looking at the galaxy, which is wild. It's super cool. So
yeah, give us,
show me something here. Give me a little bit more. Like, why are we rushing through these cool set pieces and these cool scenes? I will also say, and I think I said this from the beginning, that maybe my most major complaint is just enemy design. Like, it's a little boring.
Okay.
Yeah. Master Chief's a little boring. Cortana's a little boring. Also horrible voice acting. Like, really bad voice acting for Cortana in this game. And although I did feel at the end, dude, there's this awesome scene. We'll talk about it. They get on the ship. Cortana, the ship severs in half. One part gets through the slip space wormhole. The other part is just floating in space. That's how we leave Master Chief. But there's this awesome shot where he's crawling up to Cortana, and she's just kind of standing there in front of him as he's like standing up. I'm like, this is a really cool shot. And then at the end, they have this really cool scene where he's in cryogenic sleep, and she's just kind of overlooking him, I thought almost like a bubbling romance. I don't know if they go any further with this with Cortana and Chief, but I kind of dig it. So that's a cool. I dig it, because I'm like, yeah, this is cool. Like, how does this all work? It's 500 years in the future. I have no idea what's going on here.
Dude, it's like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell. I was like, yeah, that's exactly cyberpunk right. Tinkerbell.
That's a great way to put it.
And it's like, why can't you guys just get together? I know there's a little bit of a size difference in this case.
Imagine what Peter Pan would have done to Tinkerbell's body. Oh my goodness.
Shout out Mark Davis, baby. Legendary animator. But yeah, I got to say, what's funny? Two things are interesting. One, you wanted more because you wanted more context and more story. And we celebrated the story, especially in our part 2 conversation, with how great it is, like a seminal work of science fiction. But for me, I got to be honest with you, man. I kind of echo my sentiments of part 2. Yes, wonderful, thoughtful, sort of really kind of like one of the great works of science fiction, I think, across the board. But I didn't give a shit. I just have so much fun playing the game. I just want to do more,
Totally. The way this game is so ahead of its time. I mean, all of them were in some way, but this game, especially just in the scope of the stages and the AI. Like I was thinking of, and we'll talk about them when you fight the first spider enemy. Like I forget what they're called. I have it in my notes somewhere.
The Scarab.
Scarab, right?
Yeah.
I was like, this is very impressive. Not from even a design standpoint, but just like it's going on the walls, it's going on the side of the rock faces, it's walking. I'm like, this is a pretty impressive thing. And then you have this ability to fly all the way up, all the way down, use any of these vehicles. As I said before, it's got a real Battlefield 1942 kind of feel where it's like, yeah, jump in the plane, or Warhawk or something, like jump in the plane, jump in the fucking Jeep, do whatever, run on ground, throw grenades, get a rocket launcher, just figure it out. And I dig that. I think the game it's a masterclass in gameplay. I think Halo 3 in some way, it's super fun and super balanced. It's the one thing I can really appreciate the longer it goes is that it's just more and more balanced. There's more thought from Halo 1 to Halo 2 to Halo 3 in terms of monster closets, drop ships, how enemies come in. There's that scene when you're in the hive mind, like space or whatever, with all the vaginal doors.
I didn't know how to put it. That's how to put it.
I wrote notes here. Why does the door look? What's with the vaginal doors? Yeah, I'm gonna
I was thinking Sarlacc pit, but that's just one thing removed from a vaginal door. So yeah.
Yeah, you can see here. I don't know if this will come through for people. What it says.
See.
It says it
Oh
here.
my God.
What's with the vaginal doors? Gross. But at that scene, I was like, this is really impressive. You are moving in this spiral, random direction. You have really no idea where you're going. Enemies are constantly coming at you. It feels balanced and fun. It deals with the power fantasy in a really great way. I mean,
yeah,
there's just no doubt that from a storytelling perspective, it's a masterclass. I can't help but disagree in terms of, does the story matter or not, or do you care or not? It's so cool. Why didn't you, dude? The story is about the Covenant, this alien conglomeration of races that are mega religious. They have this idea of what these ancient devices can do. They're wrong. There's a civil war between them. Dude, there's a part of the game where you're playing with the Flood. I mean, that was super cool. Or they're like, they're on your side now, and I was like, this is dope. This is so dope. Why aren't you taking just a little more time to go through this? Truth kills the other Covenant leaders. You have this one group of brutes that are still really loyal. The elites kind of split off. And the entire time, Guilty Spark obviously turning on you. This is a whole nother thing, but why did they name their studio after, not Bungie, but Microsoft? Why did they name their studio 343? You named it after the bad guy in Halo 3? One of the worst boss fights ever, by the way.
Oh my God. I wanted so much from that fight.
It was so boring. Like I was easy. Like, it was a comically easy. I was like, what is this shit? This sucks. It should have gone into like it should have been like, oh, and like and then like gone like a Metal Gear Rex type thing or whatever. And it's like in the center and you have to like hit it.
See, that would have been cool, Kyle. But I also like the idea of kind of cutting against the grain and making this epic boss fight with something really tiny.
Yeah,
that's fun.
Too. Yeah,
but do something to make the experience last. You shouldn't beat that the first time you play it. You should have to figure it out a little bit.
It should have more than one attack as well.
Yeah. It was way too easy.
It was strange where I was even thinking I only played it on normal, but I know people play these games on legendary, which is very hard. That's 2 steps up.
Yeah, I played on normal too.
And that's hardcore as fuck. And actually, you get a different ending if you beat it on legendary, apparently. I don't know if you read about that.
Yeah, and different things intermittently throughout the game, I also heard.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see all that. By the way, I was finding the skulls, and I couldn't pick them up. Did you find any skulls? I don't know if you can only pick them up on harder difficulties, but I found a few of them.
I think.
Yeah, I don't know what that's all about, but those are the collectibles, and then they allow you to augment things. But yeah, I wanted more out of that, too. It almost reminded me of the Lazarevich fight in Uncharted 2, where just from the perspective of, you don't need to do this. Like, there's a part of me that feels like Guilty Spark is unable to fight, like, or whatever. Like, it's just a thing. Like, it does, instead of just shooting this powerful beam at you and turning on you and all that, which is cool. And he kills Johnson and all that. And I get that.
Yeah, that's right.
But to me, I was like, wouldn't it have been cool if you didn't have to do this? You didn't really have to do this. This game doesn't need boss fights. Shooters don't need boss fights. And especially end of stage boss fights. Like, you have the Scarab fights and all these things, but then you move on. And so, and that reminds me a lot of Lazarevich in Uncharted 2, where it's like, oh, you don't need to do this. You don't need to end it like this. It would have been kind of cool, actually, if maybe this is anticlimactic in some way too, where Guilty Spark turns on them, kills Johnson, and then McMaster just shoots it.
Oh, see,
Because
I like that.
Yeah, like it's like in just a cutscene.
I like that too. And listen, I like boss fights. You know, I'm a mark for the boss fight model. I love that. But this, I feel like Halo is a game of momentum. That's kind of the appeal and kind of the fun is kind of that forward motion and that rhythm. And the boss fight thing interrupts that. You know what I mean? Even if they're fun, thoughtful boss fights that are kind of, a lot of, kind of joyful to execute and be involved with. I think, yeah, it's just Halo. It's not for Halo, at least not so far over these three. It doesn't fit the mold.
It is so funny though, seeing games that I really love, like specifically the Resistance trilogy, but to a lesser extent Killzone, which was really designed to take on Halo in some way, and I think beats Halo dramatically.
That's what
in some
everybody
ways.
says. Yeah.
Although not like in terms of visuals and all that, and just Killzone's a way better looking game. The Hellgaster way cooler, villains and all the rest. Their orange eyes, I love that. They're human. They're just wearing masks. And I will get to the Killzone one day. They're really hard to play because they're not available on the new consoles. You have to go back to PS3 to play all the Killzones.
Oh wow.
Well, Killzone 1's on PS2, but they ported it to Killzone or to PS3. And the other two were only on there. Killzone Shadowfall is a PS4 launch game, and that was the end. There's also a Killzone game on Vita and a Killzone game on PSP. And Resistance has been dead other than a couple spin-offs as well. But those games I think do a better job from the visuals, but it's funny playing those games and thinking about them, especially with how intimately I know Resistance and being like, wow, they stole so much from Halo. It's so funny. There's a monster, like a spider like scarab like monster in the beginning of Resistance 3 that you fight, and I'm like, holy shit. I mean, this is taken straight from Halo 3. Like I had no idea that there were certain things like that, which I think are so funny. There are even enemies in the second Halo that have like the exhaust things on the back.
Oh yeah.
And those are the Chimera from Resistance. The Chimera in Resistance, which is one of the cool little things about them, is that they're like alien. They're actually deformed humans, but they're alien imbued creatures, and they put these exhaust ports on the back of them, and they spread out like wings. I don't know if I have.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh wait, hold on a second. A rare visual aid. I don't know if you can see, this is a Chimera from Resistance.
Oh my God, I love that design.
But these things on the back are like stitched into them, and they allow them to cool off. So if you shoot them when they put them up, you just blow them up.
Dude, what a great idea.
And there's similar things in Halo 2 specifically. I was like, okay, well, that's maybe where that came from.
That's funny. So now you could retroactively see these things now that you've experienced the game.
Right. We need Resistance back so bad. Come on, Insomniac. All right, Dig. Let's get into it. So the game takes place. First of all, how do you like when games, books, movies take place right after the last one? I dig that a lot. This is what I wanted out of The Last of Us. You didn't play The Last of Us Part 2 yet. I won't spoil it for you, but you definitely have to do that. I assume they're going to really. My theory is that they're obviously going to release it on PS5 in prelude to the next season, and I think they're going to have all calendar year. And the strike fucked everything up, so we're probably not going to get that season until 2025 at this point. So I think they have a little bit of time. So we'll get there eventually, but. One of the things I wanted out of The Last of Us, which we didn't get, and this isn't a spoiler, I guess, is that I always thought it would have been very cool if The Last of Us Part 2 picked up right after the end of the conversation, that when Joel tells Ellie what he tells her at the end of that game. Instead, it's not like that at all. And so they take that decision. They say this is only 2 weeks, not even, I don't think, after Halo 2. How do you feel about that? I love that kind of continuity, especially as we've played them on top of each other. Yeah,
that kind of tether is so cool because it really honors what came before. And as gamers, you really have to go in and start from the beginning, right? There's a continuation that's sort of necessary. It's also kind of courageous, I think, from a storytelling perspective, but it also makes sense, right? Because it's especially in a cliffhanger ending like Halo 2, to pick it right up. It's I think it's fun, and I think it's probably really tempting to go in and say, okay, we got new ideas, there's new things. Maybe we'll kind of thread it together retroactively or kind of in a backwards way, but let's start with a departure because now we have this new idea and we want to do this new thing. So it takes a lot of, I think, kind of, restraint too, to not do that and just pick it up. But I feel like because of the nature of the way 2 ended, kind of had to, so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I love, although I didn't see it, I only read about it, the legendary ending where they more set up where like they see the planet where Halo 4, I guess, takes place. The Chief and Cortana.
Right.
Because it's cool to think at the end, they all think Chief is dead, which I love. And I guess it would have been interesting if they just, even we thought Chief was dead.
I like that.
Or that, like, when you beat it on Legendary, that's when you see Chief in the cryogenic sleeping pod with Cortana over him and they're going towards the planet. Maybe that's the payoff. But I wouldn't have minded even us thinking that he was dead. And I know a lot of people look at this game as being like, it should have ended with him here. And I think that the thing we have to say here, I mean, I only know this from my Halo loving friends over the years, Ryan McCaffrey and others, where this is considered kind of like the high point. It all kind of goes downhill from here, which
that sucks.
And I'm really interested because there's 5 more. I mean, there's ODST, Reach, 4, 5, and Infinite. So, and we'll probably never even get to Infinite. We have so many more games to go. People say that I'll like them the more they go because they become broader Colin-like shooters. And I'll be interested to see why people say that. But a lot of people have said that to me. And maybe it's because of my love of some of the other Alien shooters. But yeah, I think a little more mystery would have been good wrapping up, especially because who gives a shit about Master Chief? I'm not trying to be
No.
The game is great. It really is. It's super fun to play. Who gives a shit about this character? I don't get it. He's an avatar.
He's a vehicle into the action.
People used to make fun of Killzone and be like, well, who cares about Sev and all these different characters? And I'm like, dude, they're just as bad as Master Chief. I was going into this thinking, oh, Master Chief must have some profound thing. I wanted him to take his helmet off or do something.
Sure.
And instead, it's just, there's one thing I like about Master Chief, and I'll talk about that later. But I don't know. He's
a little bit weak nucleus to build a cell around.
Exactly.
Especially such a great, you know what I mean? Such a great, everything else is so rich. The other characters, the world building, the tech, the bad guys, the good guys, this multi-pronged war being fought on multiple fronts. You got all this bitchin' shit. And but I think because he works as like kind of like the player surrogate or an audience proxy, but kind of not. He has a character. He has a voice. We don't see his face. We talked about Motocross Boba Fett and Mountain Dew and all that kind of shit, and how it made sense visually and from a cultural perspective. But yeah, it's so interesting. What was the other thing we were talking about recently where it was like the same sort of thing where the main character or the main thing was so weak and then everything else around it was so rich and textured? I forgot what it was, but I'll think of it. But it's the same type of thing.
Was this something we covered here?
Yeah, I think it was something we talked about on KnockBack. It was the Final Fantasy games.
Oh,
where
yeah.
like, all the other characters, even the NPCs in some cases, were so much more impressive.
And we're talking specifically about 1, 2, and 3. Just 1, so 2, and 3. We're not talking about 4 and 6.
No. Oh my gosh, of course not. No, how dare you?
Oh, Madonna. You're absolutely right, though. It is very weird. Like people, I expected a lot more out of this character based on his staying power, because it's just not great. I actually just looked it up. Did they ever take his helmet off? They do. I just saw a picture of him.
Oh, they do?
Yeah. In a later game. But I wanted to see more of that. He's supposed to be like this crazy 300-pound superhuman.
Okay.
It would just been cool to, he's like 6'10" or whatever he is, or maybe even bigger than I love that kind of stuff. It's cool, but
he should be a brute.
And it go, yeah, exactly. That would be awesome if he was amazing. Yeah. But I guess it kind of goes into, I don't want to speak too out of turn because I'm really not familiar with Destiny at all, but there seem to be no characters involved with Destiny either. And so maybe they're leaning more into the lore as opposed to that. They're just, and I don't think you need it's not Horizon or God of War or something. You don't need every game to have a centralized character around it. So
that's fair.
He was a little bit disappointing, but I do love at the beginning, Sergeant Johnson, chomping on his cigar, finds Chief. And they're not aware that he's made a deal with the Arbiter, which is cool. So they hold the gun under his chin and all that. It was a pretty cool intro sequence.
Did we talk about, Kyle, in part 2? I don't think we did. Al Matthews Apone from Alien 2 and how this Johnson character is a direct ripoff of Apone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, we didn't talk about that, but you're right.
And apparently a very transparent one. They were like, yeah, this is supposed to be Apone, obviously. Who I think Al Matthews passed in 2018. But it's cool that he was alive long enough to see this, because that character is ripped directly from Aliens. Now, listen, if you're going to reference a sci-fi movie, reference the best, steal from the best.
course.
I love it. You know,
Great
we
artist,
all
yeah.
know exactly what that's sending up, but I don't think we mentioned it last time. And how can you not, can you not mention that?
Yeah, that's true. I always think of things we don't mention on the shows, though. We can't be all inclusive. Like,
Oh, it's so
there's just
hard.
too many things. There's too many things.
So much stuff.
All right. Let me ask you this before we even get into more of the story stuff, because I wrote this down in my notes and I was curious what you thought of this. What do you think of the visor view?
Mm.
The Metroid Prime style visor view. We haven't really talked about this, and I think it's most pronounced here. Very busy, very of its time. I like very clean UIs with as little as possible on them. I even like UIs that have disappearing elements where if you don't need them or you're not playing or whatever, it just goes away. They give you this is first person through the literal lens of Master Chief. How did you feel about that? I feel like it's a little distracting only because that was the way it went at that time, certainly inspired by great first person shooters. Like I said, Metroid Prime as well, but through the modern lens, that was just something I focused on a lot, fixated on in a negative way this time, where I'm like, there's just too many things, like 7 grenade icons and like a huge bar in the middle and these like this glassy sort of etch work to show you the visor, and then you got this stuff in the bottom and you got the gun stuff, and I'm like, that's just too much, man. I don't need all this data, especially because I love that they really read the data off of not all of the guns, but like you're using a human machine gun and it says the bullet count on it. I mean, that's good stuff. So you can really use that in a clever way to circumvent that. I would prefer more of a Call of Duty approach, I think, in this sense.
I could see that bothering you a lot more. I didn't even think about it, to be honest with you. To me, it was clean, intuitive. I think the HUD didn't, but the only thing I noticed at one point in the game, it's not like it really bugged me in any long-term way, is the health bar is that light blue, or your shield regeneration is that light blue color. And I thought a more stark color might be more noticeable or have you paying closer attention to your status. But that also might have been more distracting for a player like you. The only thing I don't really like in the first person perspective, Kyle, is I don't want to be doing a lot of platforming. And I noticed this game had a little more of that. Just a little more, not a lot. Some narrow passageways, some sort of, a couple of things where it was like a narrow walkway, a skinny walkway, a little precarious. I don't want to do that in a first person perspective. It's just, to me, it's just not fun. But the HUD didn't bother me at all. I thought it was, the only thing cool is like we talk about something like Dead Space, where it's really thoughtfully and creatively integrated into the look of the character. Now, Dead Space is obviously different. There's perspective differences and everything, but so you like to see the creativity of something with a thoughtfulness or the inventiveness to tie it in a little better. But no, it didn't bother me. I haven't played the Metroid Prime games in a long time, and I think I'm going to start with 4 and work my way backwards when it finally comes out.
Yeah, who knows, man, what's going on with that game?
Oh my God,
that game was announced years ago.
Nightmare.
I want to say that game was announced like right when Switch was announced,
I think so.
If I'm not mistaken. And
yeah,
I think they said at some point that
2017.
they were going to, I don't know much about Nintendo anymore, but that they were going to start again or do something else. I mean, Retro is very talented. I think that you are limited by first person as opposed to third person because there's just less for you to cleverly do. Like if you think about Drake, like you can see Drake getting the shit beat out of him. Obviously the screen gets darkened or whatever, but there's some visual element that you can see of him by observing him that you just can't get. And especially Isaac in Dead Space. I mean, that's the perfect example. The spinal health bar
Oh my God,
is brilliant. The meter that chronicles your magic use or whatever you would be in that game.
So good.
Is cool. It's like the little circular meter and all. Oh, it's awesome. It's brilliant. But that's not an advantage you have in first person, unfortunately.
It's a great point.
So they have to. I don't know. I just think that there's cleaner ways to play with it. I think that they were there almost with the guns. Although I understand when you're using the alien guns, you might not be able to read them or they don't have those same, and you're not going to use like a pistol and it's going to have a readout on it. But
sure,
they were almost there. In other words, it's a minor quibble, a more major quibble I wanted to ask you about, Dig, in terms of gameplay.
Yeah.
And I wrote this down, and I don't think we talked about this at all. It's like, I'm so annoyed that you can't cook your grenades in this game. I love cooking grenades. And I was talking that Mike is a big FPS fan. She loves Call of Duty. She's a big shooter fan generally. She loves Gears as well, which is third person. But
okay.
And we were talking about the art of cooking grenades and like how fun it is to cook grenades in Call of Duty or in Resistance or something and throwing it too late and blowing yourself up, or throwing it and it blows up like right in their faces. It's so fun, but there's something so anticlimactic about the grenade throws in this because you're just hitting the button and you're just And then the enemies just kind of all react the same way. You're hoping for the best. They're usually useful against lots of smaller enemies like the flood creatures.
Exactly.
Did you lament that at all? I love cooking a grenade. I feel like it's missing here.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with games like Call of Duty. I understand your point and then it gives a little more texture because you're timing things and it's a little more of effective of a strategy.
It's scary. It's cooking grenades is scary, dude.
It's so fun. Yeah. That's such a fun idea. And, it reminds me of watching any war movie, post World War I guess, where grenades were a thing. Where it's like, that is a scary notion to be in a foxhole and have that thing and time it and everything. So carry that dynamic into a game, you could do a lot with that. It's actually interesting that they didn't do that. But I guess, again, not fixing something that's not broken. And the grenades, I had fun with the grenades. I think it's another dimension to this game. But I'll be honest with you, the different types, including like the landmines or the trip mines or whatever in this game, I throw them all and used in the same exact way. I wasn't even paying attention to what I was throwing.
Me too. You can toggle them with the D-pad, but I never did either. It's like whatever I had. Yeah.
I just get them all out.
And you're always picking more up, and the game doesn't do a great job of telling you that. It does tell you, but it's just not quite bright enough. So sometimes you look up and you're like, oh shit. Sometimes you hit the bumper and you have no grenades left. Sometimes you hit the bumper and you have 7,000 grenades for some reason.
They could have done that better with just an audio cue, a louder click or something, just saying you kind of restocked a few grenades or something. You always had to be checking that upper left-hand corner. Yeah. But no, it didn't. I was just lobbing grenades until they were done. I think I took that strategy in the second one where I would try to throw two, like throw them over here, knowing they were going to dodge right and make sure I throw another one over there. And this one, I noticed that they'll just stop shooting and get distracted long enough to kind of zig. And when they zig or zag, then you just shoot them while they're not attacking you. That's the only thing, because the grenade very rarely, again, unless it was the flood or an enemy with really weak AI, it's not gonna work.
Totally.
So you just lob them out there and hope for the best.
Did you use any of the secondary stuff? I actually didn't even realize that I had that for probably most of the game, and then I tried to use them, but I didn't really need it. I'm sure at higher difficulties they're quite essential because you can deploy shields and turrets and stuff like that. The one thing that the enemy starts using first, and then you get access to them, and I didn't realize you get them too, is that flare weapon that kind of acts as both an incendiary and some sort of flashbang, which I thought was super cool. I thought that was a really, really neat idea. It was quite effective when the enemies used it. You kind of run away from it and turn your screen around. I don't know how much experience you have with like flashbangs in video games, but those are so effective if you play a Call of Duty or a shooter where you're looking at the screen, the flashbang goes off, and then you just have the screen you're looking at permanently, no matter where you're going, as it like slowly goes away. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant idea to make them more effective. I loved that the enemies had that. I thought that was a very cool idea. Just totally blowing out the brightness.
That was really cool. Yeah. I thought that because I play on Steam. I thought that was my computer tripping up for like the first quarter of the game. And I was like, what is going on with these flares? It's turning white. Then I realized that's a thing the enemy's using against me. Flashbangs always remind me of the Metal Gear games, right? Oh, yeah. Of course, Metal Gear Solid. And yeah, it was fun. But again, I didn't get into a lot of these extra things. The flare things you're talking about, I thought were like, I was thinking about them as like almost sticks of dynamite. I think I threw them out by accident and they stuck into the cave wall or something. I was like, oh shit, like what are these things? Maybe even thought they were spiker crystals at first. And I was like, wait, what the hell is that thing? But yeah, a lot of the extra things and the portable shields and everything like that, I didn't find them necessary. I think because the game, especially for you and I playing on normal, was pretty damn easy.
It was the easiest one, I think, Halo 3.
Yeah, very simple, very, very easy. I think they evolved the enemy AI. They gave us a few more things to deal with, but it was sort of like shooting fish in a barrel. Whether you were in a vehicle or whether you were walking around with your guns, it was just. Now, don't get me wrong. I thought that was fun. I liked the difficulty level. It was a good time. It was easy breezy, but it was too easy to really get bogged down in. If you're getting killed a bunch of times, it's like, all right, I'm going to have to put the shield down here. I'm going to have to employ some sort of strategy. But you never really had to do that.
No, there were only a couple of times in the game where I guess really only one that I can think of where I died multiple times. And that was when you fight the two scarabs. And that was and it was frustrating me because I'm like, I know what I have to do. I don't know why I'm dying. Like you just get hit by something off screen and you're dead. It goes third person and you see your body dropping the weapons and all that, multiplayer style, which is so funny.
I love that.
And it's very funny. It's unintentionally funny, but it's very funny nonetheless. But that was the only part of the game where I was struggling, and I was like, why? It was annoying me because I knew exactly what I had to do, and I was doing it, and then I would just get killed randomly, and I was like, God damn it! But other than that, I would not play this game again, obviously, or at least anytime soon. But often I play games on the hardest difficulty for trophies on PlayStation.
You do, yeah.
And I sometimes play on normal first if it's short or whatever to kind of get a feel for it. And I always go through games being like, what's going to be the hard part of this when you play it on the hardest difficulty? And that would have been
you would have been
complete fucking chaos,
eviscerated. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think I have this. There are certain. I can only think of 2 first-person shooters that I played where I could not do it at the time on the hardest difficulty. One was the original Call of Duty, which was released on PS3 as Call of Duty Classic, and I tried to play it on Veteran, and I couldn't even get off at Normandy. It was, I don't know, to the point where I'm like, I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to do. Like, what are you supposed to do here? And then World at War, which is the notoriously difficult Call of Duty game from Treyarch. I wanted to beat that on Veteran, and I got about halfway through it. And that game is so hard. It is insane how hard it is. And the reason that it is hard, and people have realized this, you'll think this is hysterical probably, is that the thing that's not funny, but the reason that it is hard is that there are unlimited monster spawns in it. So instead of being like there are 7 enemies and you're at like an encampment, you kill them, you go in, you move around, you explore. It's like, no, you got to keep, like, they're going to keep coming. So that was one of the design philosophies of the game. The other thing is on Veteran, and you can see videos of this. This is the funniest shit. This is where it's like, when you get a grenade thrown at you in some game and it'll be like a grenade icon and it'll be like, the grenade's carrot, little grenade over here, kind of giving you an indication where it is. There are scenes, and you could find them on YouTube. They're hysterical, where a dude's like sitting in the woods and then there's like 7 of them coming on top of him. Like literally, like it's like totally, it was impossible, and people beat it. The best way to beat Call of Duty World at War on Veteran is to run. And that's what everyone says, is to just run and try to trip the next checkpoint and the next checkpoint and the next checkpoint.
Just
like
go.
And that's how people straight up do it. So those are the only 2 shooters I can ever think of where I'm like, this is, and there are a few that I didn't even bother with. So Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus, is fucking impossible. And there is a trophy that a few people have where you have to beat it on the hardest difficulty without dying, and there's no way to spoof it, so you have to do it in one sitting. I never tried that. And then Doom and Doom Eternal from id, not even gonna bother with that, because those games are oh, Dagan, you would love Doom 2016, man. We got to get to that game at some point. You would love it.
Maybe we'll
if you want to talk about gameplay, like just this is just gameplay, oh my God.
Dude, I would love to do that. I want to get,
I'm going to write that down.
I'm fascinated with it and really never got into any of their things, including Doom.
Oh, Doom is so good because Doom 2016 is so good because everyone thought it was going to suck because it took so long. And, Doom 3 comes out in 2004, I want to say, on Xbox, which was Doom 3 was awesome, but it's a very different game than Doom 2016, and Doom 2016 is a fucking masterclass of gameplay. It's an absolutely insane game that I think you would love.
We got to do that sometime. I mean, you make a good point too. I never probably post NES. I don't like the idea of infinitely spawning enemies, but if you don't have that, right? If you don't have something like Doom where you have to clear checkpoints by annihilating all the enemies, then the run and pray sort of model it's got to work as long as it's not hard enough to just act evasively and just dodge.
Dude, I gotta find the World at War videos for you. I'll send them to you.
Sounds like a nightmare.
They're hysterical. like literally people just running through like these beautiful set pieces and like these things you're supposed to see and experience. And then people just you're hiding in the hedges and there's just a constant grenade spam on everywhere you move, there's just grenade icons as you're like running through.
Have you ever heard like the development perspective of that? Like, why did we make the game like this? Just to be difficult?
I haven't, but what my theory about, I have a few theories about this. I mean, and you and I both know like that there's some reality to the number or the quarter crunching,
right?
And how that segues to console and So you have really hard games like House of the Dead and shit where it's like, why is this so hard? I don't want, and it's like, well, it's because you're supposed to be paying for it in an arcade and we didn't do anything to edit. So there's that whole angle of difficulty, but there's another angle of difficulty, I think, in the way games were QA'd and the hardcore nature of people in the industry at that time versus now, where there's a much larger texture of difficult games, because there are notoriously difficult games still to this day. And there are games I can't beat. Like, I'm embarrassed as fuck that Declan, our nephew, beat Cuphead. I know I can beat it if I sat there and really try, but I don't have the patience. It's like, I'm not doing this. I remember when we did it for KnockBack. That was the one where I'm like, I didn't beat it. I just went, I got to the third world. I was going to throw my Switch. You know how you and I find it really funny? Like, you and I are probably the only people that find it funny when, so like, we visualize, like, I have an intrusive thought of someone talking on the phone and we just walk up to the person and just take the phone and just fucking throw it as far as humanly possible. That's what I wanted to do with my Switch when I was playing Cuphead. So but I know I don't have the level of patience, but I probably have the level of skill. But there are still games that I can't beat. And there are games that are Soulsborne games. Like, fuck that. I hate that shit. I really do. I fucking hate it. When I played Elden Ring, I was like, this is so obnoxious. I have no idea why anyone would find this funny. But I'm also the kind of person where I know I got to stick and move and kind of be patient in this boss fight. And then I'm like, fuck it. And then I go in and I get...
It's hard to find those games that are balanced in between too difficult and too easy, right? That's a tightrope walk to make a game that's just hard enough. That's why listen, Halo 3 was too easy, but it was fun. But many games that do kind of walk that razor's edge, but you don't want to make it too hard. At this point in my life, there would have been a time at some point, maybe in my late 20s, let's say, where I would have tried to beat the hardest games just as a badge of honor, just because I want to put myself up there with the elite gamers, like the gamers that are among the best. I don't even know if I am that good, to be honest with you, at games in general. You always say how good Chris is at games.
Yeah, Chris is probably the most naturally gifted player of video games I've ever met.
And we grew up with PJ, who was another one.
Right.
He was just good at everything.
Yeah, he was. PJ was PJ was intimidatingly good. I mean, that was... especially because the games were weird. That was the thing about PJ, was like, why do you understand how well this Japanese Dreamcast game works? I don't understand, like, how you will even know. How do you even know?
It doesn't make sense.
We would go over and play like Power Stone, and he was like the best Power Stone player I'd ever met in my life. I'm like, I don't understand. This game came out 1 week ago.
And he wasn't watching YouTube videos.
No, I don't know. He and Chris are definitely kindred in that sense. And yeah, I think I'm great in 2D spaces. And I think people actually marvel at my skill sometimes in 2D spaces, which is hysterical to me, because I'm like, this is so basic. It's just a Y and an X axis. Like, but I beat one of my rarest trophies is beating Mega Man 10 on hard without dying or whatever. And people are like, there's another one for beating it without getting hit, which is just,
insane.
I can't, I don't know. Maybe you could do that. I don't know, but I have no patience to try to figure that out. But people are like, wow, that's a crazy trophy. And I'm like, it's not that hard. Like, I don't understand. Why do you guys make this so dramatically hard? And meanwhile, you're playing something that is demonstrably way harder. Wolfenstein 2 in 3D, beating it without dying is way harder than beating Mega Man 10. Like, to the point where it's not even funny. Like, I could probably beat Mega Man 10 on hard right now without dying. And I haven't played the game in years.
You know what? Yeah. It's muscle
I don't know.
memory,
In other words, yeah, go ahead.
It's also the random elements, whether the game has that or not. Because if you could just memorize everything, eventually you're going to get great at it.
Right. That's what Mega Man is. That's what people don't understand. I mean, there are obviously bosses that are randomized. So like you think of Quick Man or something in Mega Man 2 where there's just nothing you can do. Like, it is what it is. And then there are bosses like Woodman or Airman where you can really manipulate the shit out of them. So there's that. But everything in Mega Man otherwise is totally predictable. You just have to study the game and know it. You just have to know it. Screen by screen by screen by screen. You just have to know it.
Absolutely.
And there are people can. I'll do it again someday, but because I'm out of practice. But I did really good playthroughs of Mega Man 1 through 6 at IGN that are all up, and really, I played Mega Man 1 through 10 all at once on Kind of Funny, back to back to back to back to back to back to back.
I didn't know that
on a stream.
Really,
and I think and I think I only died like 3 times in all the games combined, or something like that in that time.
Dude, that's insane.
And what's exciting for me, what's nerve-wracking but exciting about Mega Man doing that kind of stuff is Mega Man 1 is by far the hardest one.
Very
and
hard.
Also by far my least favorite one. So like just getting through that one, and it's like, okay. And then you go to Mega Man 2, which is comically easy. And then you're on your way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always, when I see guys like Chris that are so good and so very talented in 3D space, like no joke. I mean, Chris is no joke good at Halo. I think like pro level, at Halo, as far as I
Wow.
understand. And
And he loves it.
Yeah, he does. But the thing is we tried to do Let's Plays together where I was trying to challenge him on things and he would just destroy them. We did a video together where there's this part of Titanfall 2. I was missing one trophy. Do you know the story? I don't want to bore you, but
I don't think so.
I beat Titanfall 2 which is an awesome game, really wonderful shooter, on the hardest difficulty, got all the collectibles, got all the trophies, but I was missing one bronze trophy, and it was for this training module where you had to do this wall jumping and wall running exercise in a certain amount of time. I wasn't getting anywhere close, and it's a notoriously difficult trophy. And the game had come out like 2 years before, and I sat, or maybe even more than that, 3 or 4 years before. And I sat down with Chris, and we did a Let's Play where he just did it. He hadn't played Titanfall in a few years.
Holy shit.
And he's like, oh yeah, I can do it. And then like he practiced and bounced around. He's like, and then he did it. He just did it. I'm like, dude, I sat here for hours trying to do this. Probably 5 hours or more of my life spent to trying to figure this out. And so that's a different level. And that's why, and I learned that very quickly with him. That's why it bothers me when people judge us based on the amount of games we play. And Chris probably plays the fewest amount of games and beats the fewest amount of games out of all of us. But people don't understand who they're talking to. You know, like it's a guy who mechanically dissects games in a way that I don't even get. And I've been in this industry for a long time. So yeah, I love respect to him.
That's high praise coming from you too. That's what people have to understand. That's really cool. You know, and I would say that speaks to his generation, but that doesn't really mean anything. You know what I mean? They grew up with a really nice kind of variety of games from what was around when they were born to now. Like, yeah, I think they were kind of right in that gamer power wheelhouse. So, you know, it kind of makes sense, but that's so cool. I kind of love that. I realized when Street Fighter 5 came out, because I think randomly playing fighting games, pick your poison, whatever fighting game, against other players, whether in person in the arcade or online, you know, live players, not a CPU. I think that's the ultimate test of how good of a gamer you are, because you have to be Johnny on the spot. And I realized when Street Fighter 5 came out for online play that I just wasn't that good. And whether I got rusty, I was getting old, I was losing a step in my 40s or late 30s, early 40s, or whether I really was never really that good compared to the global scale of things.
That's what I think was the truth for all of us.
You know,
was that we were just not ever that good. Because I think nothing infantilized me more than learning how good people were at fighting games. Oh my God. Like I didn't think I was great, but I was like, I can play.
Yeah.
But no, I can't. No.
I feel the same way now.
No, absolutely not. You can't play. Like, but I'm not saying you. I'm saying like for me, speaking about myself, I'm like, I can't. Colin, you can't play. You have no idea what you're doing compared to these people at all. And did you see an Evo, this last Evo, that a blind person entered?
I heard about this. I heard
based on
about this.
Yeah, based on sound cues. I guess
that's insane.
So you're dealing with, dude. It's like, come on, man. I mean, I'm not trying to be an asshole at all. I think it's awesome that kind of level of accessibility. How about the guy who lost to that person? How can you ever play Street Fighter again?
One of
if
the
you
best,
lost to that,
by the way, to even be there in that room.
Right, exactly. It's like I don't. That's insanity. I don't. Because if someone was like, "Do you think you could beat a?" I haven't played Street Fighter 4 or 5. Well, no, I played 4, I guess a little bit. I played 5, and then 6 is the newest one, right?
Yeah.
So 5 and 6 are the ones I haven't played. And it's like, all right, do you think you could sit down, you could play as Ken in Street Fighter 6 and beat a blind person? I'd be like, yes, absolutely. And then you play that guy and he beats the shit out of you.
That's insane.
I mean, that's the level of
cool.
I mean, I don't even get it.
Incredible.
I don't get it.
Incredible. I got to look at that. I got to look into that. I'm not kind of out of Evo. I haven't really watched anything in like 6 months, but I like a lot of those Street Fighter, the fighting community, YouTube, some really smart people. And not just Evo, talented, dude, but really good at the, good at the games and really good at talking about it.
Evo is dope. I think PlayStation made a very wise investment to buy Evo. And they obviously did it at a very vulnerable time for Evo as well, because of all the shit that was going on with them and their old founder. Right. But
that's fascinating.
Yeah, I tune into Evo every year here and there for various events and other fighting events too, just because I love watching people play those games at a high level. I think it's like one of the very rare examples of me watching someone play a game, because it's like chess where no two matches will ever be the same, really. So, and I love seeing who plays as who and what characters you pick and all that. So it's great stuff. So yeah, I again, playing Halo 3 on normal, it felt appropriate. But but it was never very difficult. And I think the first
No.
two games are much harder than Halo 3 was. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, Dagan, I don't know if you noticed this, and this is really true in all of the Halo games we've played so far, all three of them, but it's because of the power of the Xbox 360 versus the original Xbox. I think they're allowed to take advantage of it more here. I love the topographical geographic design of these stages. There's something very cool about the way they do things. I do think it makes it sometimes hard to find out where you're going next. Like you kind of wait for that waypoint to show up sometimes because I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do, dude. Like it doesn't read very well. It also is obsessive about going over places you've already been because they're trying to use their assets wisely. So there's not only backtracking, but clear copied and pasted parts of games. Like there's a thing in the arc late in the game where you're flying from tower to tower. And it's like, this is the same place that we were just in. Like the same with the same enemies coming out or whatever. And I'm like, is this the same? And I'm like, it's not actually the same, but so they do a lot of that kind of shit. But I love, the beginning of the game. It's funny. We brought up Metal Gear earlier, and the beginning of the game on Sierra 117 reminds me a lot of Metal Gear Solid 3, actually, with the jungle topography and kind of you're confronted with a ridge, and there's like 3 different ways you might go up it. And that this game is that kind of design philosophy over and over again, stitched together. And it reads a lot differently than some shooters, even to this day. I mean, you think about a game like The Last of Us, like, no way. I mean, there's not that level of ambition at all of getting through environments because they focus on obviously different things. So it's cool that they, even at that time, were like, you can imagine this huge grid map in their engine. They use a proprietary engine, I think, and you can see it from the top down. And then you realize that they're building a pathway through all of it. And obviously Halo and Halo 2 experienced this as well. I just think what's so impressive about the way they do things here is the scope is way bigger and there's a verticality to it with exploring, the aerial combat, ground combat, and all of the rest. So what do you take away from the stage design here if you noticed anything at all?
I remember being really impressed with the verticality of CE, of Combat Evolved. And I was like, wow, they were already doing that. And, kind of masterful at making something linear feel a little bigger, right? Because there's no real exploration. Any exploration is really light, but it makes it feel more vast and more open than it actually is. And that's a real trick. That's a really cool thing that they do. There's also something about, this might be the animation artist in me, but when you have backgrounds or settings, environments, and they just feel natural to the point where you're not really even paying attention to it. It just feels right. It feels like a proper setting for something. It kind of recedes almost. And it just becomes sort of, it feels natural. There's something really cool about that. And I love bringing up Snake Eater, starting in an organic wooded environment where that's going to change. There's going to be you're going to be in these temples and more futuristic, these sort of postmodern or future tech settings, but starting it in the woods and it's a crash thing and a crash landing and you're in this environment that feels more like earthly, I guess, was kind of a cool contrast. And it's fun too. Like there's something I think we were laughing about this in the first Halo where that recycled architecture thing was like, oh God, this again, you're not even trying to change things up or flip it horizontally to make it look a little different or whatever. But I noticed that being much less egregious in this one. There were a couple of times where I was like, oh, here we go type of a thing, but they did a good job this time of masking it. I feel like they learned that much, maybe flip a couple of things, put a different item around, make it a little more organic. So they were getting better, but there was a couple of things where I was actually looking for it at certain points and I really couldn't find it. Here and there, I think there were 2 or 3 really instances where it really kind of stood out, but otherwise totally fine. They do a good job at it. We talked about with 2 making it look a little too, I always pick on Stargate, the movie Stargate. People get really mad at me for that, but there's just something about the idea. And I don't know who this started with, Sid Mead or, the early 80s, late 70s sci-fi visual development thing, but you're taking the Egyptian sort of cues and you're tying them in with the futuristic thing and you're taking a little bit of, a pyramid and making a little bit Star Wars and you're mashing it up. There's something about that where it seems generic, but in this, I feel like now, like a lot of things with Halo, it's just becoming part of the world that we're expecting to see. It's becoming a style. And, with the third iteration, that should definitely be a thing. And I think it is. It feels consistent, but they put enough new stuff in there to make it a little bit of a departure from what came before. And that's just good design.
Yeah, there's a pretty nice variety of stages and settings in a brief 8-hour campaign that I think they deserve a lot of credit for. Because it does feel less recycly, and I don't mind that either. I mean, you have to imagine that the original Halo was so samey in some places that they were literally just, again, lifting and copying and pasting entire parts of the game. Yeah. And I don't. There seems to be a few things like that here, but it's probably not quite literally the same. Like I said later, when you're in the Ark or whatever that would be, the what do they call it, the Citadel, which is funny that they call it that because that's also a thing from Mass Effect. And I kind of
that's right.
And like I said, Mass Effect 1 came out the same year, around the same time. So that's strange. These things being in development both for Xbox 360 concurrently to each other.
Halo remember playing Halo? I mean, I played it so late. When did we do that conversation? Maybe it was 3 years ago. I don't think it was even that long ago.
No, I think it might have even been just last year, right? but probably like the beginning of last year. Yeah.
And I loved it, and I was blown away, and it was so nice to be in on the conversation of how wonderful it is. But I remember that game with the recycled architecture actually making the game confusing for navigating.
Right.
Because I was like, I've been here, but you really hadn't been there. So I was like, this is kind of a problem, so at least we're out of the woods as far as that goes. There was there's one thing I have to tell you though. It's so nice in this world of long games to be able to play something that's so brisk. And I love, and this reached a crescendo for me in Halo 3. I love the rhythm and just that forward motion and that, that constant moving forward. And just really the momentum. I really love that about this game, and just that energy of like feeling like you spent 8 to 11 hours with it. It doesn't feel that long because you're having a great time. But I kind of love that thing of just going uninterrupted. And that cave that you're talking about with the vagina caves, I got so lost in there. I remember picking up the flamethrower. That was like an iconic moment. Because as far as I knew, that was the only place you could really get that.
Yeah, you have to like go to that back corridor, right? And,
right, through that little hall, jump through that little narrow hallway, and you grab it and get back out. From that point on, I just kept going in circles. I don't know what the hell happened. It got to the point where I had to consult a YouTube video just to get out of that cycle. And it was something stupid. This dates back to our NES experiences, I'm sure. You're getting tripped up in a game, and it's you. It's not, the game isn't purposely being cryptic. It's not obtuse. It's you, but it's like trying to fight your way out of a spider's web. Like the more you do, you're just getting more stuck. And it's so aggravating because it's just something stupid that you're not seeing or doing. That happened to me in that part. And again, I'm not asking for you to relate because I think this is just a me thing. That was the only bad experience I had in this game. And I would probably give it perfect marks for fun if I didn't get tripped up in that one thing, because it was just a little too, I don't know if it was that the enemies kept coming. I'm not saying they were swarming infinitely, the flood in that point, but there was just a lot compared to other levels. And I couldn't get my bearings just because it was just a cave. There was nothing really marking the environment, no landmarks or whatever. But that was the only thing. But I was saying that more to say, do you know those moments in games where it totally happens to me a lot.
No, I have those
moments. It's not
moments.
A soft lock, but you're soft locking yourself.
Yeah, I had it just yesterday when I was playing Sea of Stars, and I was running around this town for like 15 minutes, and then I was saying to Mike, I'm like, because she's like way ahead of me, and she's like, well, I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to do here? And she's like, oh, you just got to go to the tavern, and I'm like, oh, but I went there, and then they told me to look for a character that I don't have yet, and she's like, he's in the kitchen. I'm like, oh. So
you're so lucky you have somebody to consult.
Well, I mean, usually if it's you, because I had a similar. I mean, I'll admit that I had a similar situation in Halo 3. We can talk about it now just because I guess it makes the most sense. Is I know what you're talking about. There were many times in the game where I was running in the wrong direction and I just realized it. And I'm like, oh, I got to go in the other direction or whatever.
That's so.
And in the vagina caves, it was interesting how how when everything starts to explode and go crazy at the end of that level, which is really cool, it does a really nice job of constantly dragging your eye to know where to go, even though you're kind of backtracking through this very labyrinthine section. So they did a nice job there. But actually, I had a similar situation in fighting the scarabs for the first time, where I was like, what am I supposed to do? Be like, get the power core, Chief. Chief, it's the core or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, get it. But I didn't know where to go because I kept going up the stairs and around the back. And I'm like, it must be here somewhere. And then I'm shooting the shield in front. And then I realized like all you had to do is go down and around. And there's like the power core. I'm like, oh, because I have those brain fart moments all the time. And you know it's you when you look on YouTube and you can't even find the answer to what you're talking about.
That has happened to me. Yeah. The scarab tank thing is interesting because with that, I wondered if the audio cues, like the other characters talking to you and trying to talk you through it, were timed accurately. Like, is he saying go for the knees? I already did that. You know what I mean? Is it synced to real time what's happening? You know what I noticed with those scarab tanks? And this is what I love about games where it feels like you're breaking them. I wasn't breaking anything, but at least it gives you the feeling of figuring something out. Was I would stay in the scorpion tank. The scorpion tank's a little hard to deal with because it's so slow, but it's so powerful that if you get in the main body of the tank, not the machine gun turret, and you could do the entire scarab from the tank. You don't have to get out once the knees are shot and get inside. You could do it all from the back.
That's awesome.
And I figured that out. And then it was super, super easy, even fighting the two. But I love that this game had less of that feeling like you're breaking it. I remember taking the little Ghost, the little Covenant gliders into the caves. I talked about this with 2. And I was like, I'm not supposed to be doing this, you know? And you couldn't do that in this one. I remember trying to take the Scorpion tank inside the Citadel or whatever, and they were like, nope, it won't fit. But I felt like with the Scarabs, at least, you're kind of exploiting a weakness in the game, you know? I love that.
I didn't know you could do that. I felt like the vehicles were all were much more robust this time in terms. Did you notice that as well? They seem to take tons of damage.
Yes.
It seems sometimes like they were even impervious to damage, although I don't know if that's entirely true.
That might be true.
But like it seemed like it was more relevant what your shield health was for your person than it was for which I dug, because I felt like sometimes you get a little annoyed. Like it's like, well, we have the power fantasy of flying this thing and fucking things up a little bit. I love the different vehicles. What a masterclass of gameplay and design. I mean, for all these things to work together is pretty cool and pretty advanced. Really, really love that. And I love all the new additions too. I love that there's one of the human, you get like a human Jeep and it doesn't have a weapon. It has a horn, which is hysterical. Did you notice that?
Yeah, it doesn't have the mounted
so like when
gun.
you hit the trigger, it's like, meh, meh,
I love that.
which is like very, very funny. It was very funny to me.
That
although
was
annoying
that was so cute. I love that shit. It's so funny when you do funny shit like that.
And since we're talking about the vehicles, I wanted to ask you about this, and I wrote this down because I wanted to specifically note this, which was, though we give Master Chief grief for whatever, his lack of character and interest.
Poor John.
Poor John 117 or whatever his name is. I do love this one aspect of the game, and it comes out more, sometimes you're on foot when this happens, but often in vehicles, which is, I like to look at all the AI Marines, and they all know who this is and know he comes from like the super soldier Spartan program. And he's there, like they cheer when he gets there sometimes and stuff. And I love the idea of those guys getting this crazy story where they go back to Earth and they were like, yeah, I was at the battle of the Covenant battle at the Ark. And there was a time where Master Chief was driving a Jeep and I was on the machine gun turret, and I was fucking going off and then, he went on his way, like he thrashed away. And that was like that moment happened to that AI character. And I couldn't help but get away from that notion of how neat that is, that if you look at it from a deep storytelling perspective, these NPCs are encountering this heroic figure as you go through, and they're all so amped. And so I think about 2 of them, like one jumps in the Jeep with me in the side and he's machine gunning, the other one's the machine gun nest. And it's like, those are real guys that are going to go tell this crazy ass story, about how Master Chief was driving and they were destroying these Covenant forces. I don't know. I couldn't help but get away from that. And I loved that.
I love that idea obviously. For a side game, like an offshoot game or a side quest, playing from one of these NPCs perspective. Yeah, he's a straight up celebrity, man. They even say things like when you go to jump in one of the warthogs, they're like, I don't know why I thought I could drive in the first place. That's how, and when he comes in, they're all like whispering, like, we're all right now, the demon's here type of thing. And, they could tell a story like, I was fighting side by side with Master Chief, and then he took my gun,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's amazing. Like, it's super cool. I love that. So that's, you get in some serendipitous way, you get the character development just from the way people react to him.
It's fun. I mean, that character, why not? I mean, it's kind of a whole, to me, it's become this whole other way of doing something, creating a game or telling a story. It's just make that center thing sort of simple. I don't want to say even generic, just simple. And then flesh out everything else. It's just kind of another way of doing things, but he's just a fun, iconic looking, playable protagonist in a game. He's a household name. I mean, I talked about this. Target and Walmart, go in, there's Mega Block sets. You could get a Spiker, you could get a little Master Chief and a little play set.
How did they end up with Mega Blocks and not Lego? I don't understand that.
I think there's Mega Blocks, there's Lego, there's what's that Polish company? Like I think it begins with a C, but there's a bunch of different block companies, right? And I think they do their licenses on a rotating basis because who has Nickelodeon now? Who has the Paramount
Kobe
stuff?
Is the company you're thinking of.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Which, they make really cool stuff. They make the Ghost of Kiev, I think, fighter jet, actually.
Oh, jeez.
Which is kind of cool. But, I mean, I think there's almost some sort of backroom understanding of, we'll have this for a little while, then it's going to be kicked over to Lego. Lego will have things in perpetuity, important things like Star Wars, let's say. They're not going to give that up. But other things, I think they go into it with an expiration date on the license, and then it goes to this, and then they didn't do a good job, so let's take it back from Mega Blocks. Pokemon is a big one.
Yeah, might as well put them against
Halo,
each other.
It's in the box stores. You know what I mean? Not just in the video game aisle. So, and I think that, again, I know we make fun of Motocross Boba Fett, but and the Mountain Dew color palette was just something brilliant that we touched on, I feel like.
that is special.
It's so, but you know what I mean? I think it's just that visual imprint that, that makes them fun. And the voice is kind of cool. And this sort of ongoing mystery of not seeing what's behind that who's behind that helmet, which eventually, obviously, sadly will not be a thing at some point. But yeah, I mean, it's one way of doing it, man. You can't, think of an iconic video game character that we really care about, that we really know about, right? I think about Nathan Drake. Love that guy, but we get a lot of texture over the games from him. We know his origins, his childhood. We see him with a family later on. We know, everything about him, that he's kind of like his, we get the good, the bad, the black, the white, the gray, but Master Chief is just, I kind of like it in that it's just a video game character. You know what I mean? You don't have to be, doesn't have to be so serious. Doesn't have to be so in depth. It's just fun.
Yeah, I agree with you that I want to be clear that in the main, I don't mind Master Chief at all how he is. I think it's totally great. I'm just confused why they focused on him so much for so long. They had an opportunity after this to move on and do something else, and it would have been just as Halo. People don't even really like the Halos after this compared to the first three.
Yeah.
Comparatively. I mean, people love them all, but I don't want to diminish that. But I just it's an interesting choice that was, like I said, replicated by Killzone and others, where they have, Resistance has 2 or 3 different protagonists and everything. So yeah, I don't know. It's
that's interesting to have protagonists that come, and I think, right, there was such a backlash with playing as Arbiter for a little while, and 2, apparently, that they sort of restrained themselves from doing that again. You're John and purely Master Chief.
I prefer that. I didn't like playing as Arbiter as much. Like, it was cool, but I remember we said it was very MGS2, where,
yes,
although not quite, because you play as Raiden first and then Snake and you don't go back and forth. But
that's a good point, though.
But I wasn't crazy about that either. It's like, let me just play as this guy. It was cool because you had like the cloaking device, and you have the special melee weapons, which are obviously available to Chief. And I love those melee weapons. And by the way, shout out to the fucking hammer weapon in this game. Oh, love it. Just love it.
It's so good. What is it called? The gravity hammer?
Yeah.
Fun.
It's so dope. When you see one of those guys show up, I'm like, yes, I'm gonna fuck you up, and I'm taking that thing.
The vibro axe, as I was calling it.
The vibro axe. Very nice.
I like that. I liked having another melee weapon. You still had the lightsaber, whatever the hell that thing's called. I have my cheat sheet here. Where is that weapon? The energy sword. Sorry. energy sword. I got in trouble for saying laser weapons in the last for the
Oh,
company
laser
for the plasma weapons.
Whatever. Who cares? My
I got
God.
my cheat sheets. I got them. My
Okay,
friend.
good. You're ready to go.
I'm ready.
What did you make of the graphical acuity and design of the game? I feel like the one problem here is that I don't think the Master Chief Collection did anything to this game except for maybe up-res it. So we were playing, and Master Chief Collection is native to Xbox One, so you're kind of going backwards in some way with the way the games look. Did you notice that, or did that bother you at all? I did appreciate that I wasn't interrupting every cutscene by being able to switch between the two versions to see how bad it used to look. So that was no longer an option for me. So I was incredibly focused. But yeah, what did that hold back anything for you?
Yeah, that's true. That was no longer a distraction. Yeah, what did I learn? That there were frame rate and resolution improvements, like you said. That was really it. There's no remake, and I saw a couple of YouTube videos talking about conjecturing whether there even should be one, because again, this is 360.
Yeah, I don't think
this is an original X-Bone. It doesn't bother me, man. I have to go back to like literally early N64 for that to be, listen, I've been around since Space Invaders. You know what I mean? Like, I've been in arcades since I was 6 in the late 70s. So that's not a cost for entry. In fact, sometimes it's fun to go back and just do something retro and in its original state. And listen, this is something that was out over 15 years ago. I'm already late. So the remake in a way makes me feel even later. So I feel like I got ahead of it this time. So in any way, it's gratifying, I think.
I don't know if is it are some of the characters cell shaded in the cutscenes or anything like that? Did you notice anything like that?
You know what? Yeah, this would be, they probably are actually.
Because I felt like it had a Borderlands quality to it that the other two games didn't have, which I wanted to call out. I don't know if that's the exact right verbiage though, but I noticed it, like especially in the human faces. I was like, wow, this looks like Borderlands. Oh, like really?
That's interesting. You're right in that wheelhouse of that era, where that would be certainly a viable technology, along with the earlier mocap and stuff like that. So, but definitely some uncanny valley. But who cares? Like that's the era. You know what I mean? I almost feel like it wouldn't be right if you didn't have that. You're playing a game from 2007, and it feels like 2007. It's just fun.
Yeah, it's fine. It's very nostalgic. There's something nostalgic about, or at least for me, about going back to old games, even games I wasn't born for. So pre-1984 games where you're nostalgic for a time and place and era that you never lived in. I think that's what shows like Downton Abbey do really well. Where it's like, wow, man, I never experienced this, but I feel like I could have and would have and should have. And so when you go back to these old games, seeing them through that lens is cool. And I think that it's important. See, we were saying, would it have even been necessary at the time to remake it at the time? No, because we're talking about a launch era Xbox One game, but I think now they would be very wise to go back and remake this game. I mean, it's all, but I mean, it hasn't been confirmed, but it's heavily rumored that Sony's remaking the original Uncharted, and I think that's the same year. And now I'm like, that's fine. That doesn't bother me at all. It's been 15 years. I mean, can you imagine how good it's going to fucking look?
Yeah, it's time.
And how it's going to do justice to Drake's fortune in that game. It doesn't erase the original one, but I'm excited for that but this collection is old. It's 10 years old, at this point. So you got to forgive them for that. But it is so weird how they, I want to get more into the game itself, but I guess I'll say this now is I'm just so surprised reading about this game and remembering it and reminiscing about it. Man, did Microsoft drop the ball? How did they drop the ball so bad? Not with Halo necessarily, but they were winning. They were winning. This game sold 15 million copies. Games didn't sell 15 million copies back then. That wasn't a thing that happened. I mean, now we have games that sell 100 million copies and more, and those are very rare, but games regularly sell more than 1 million copies now, which was not incredibly common back in the day. It's become more common as more games and more people play and all the rest. So it's just so surprising that they had something this resonant and powerful and not only ended up kind of really losing to Sony long term, but lost to Sony in the short term. I mean, PlayStation turned it around by the end of that generation. I just don't know how they botched it. Like, it's very weird. The more and especially when I say this in the wake of not only Halo 3, but later, and we'll get to it next week on Sacred Plus, is Alan Wake, which I'm infatuated with that game in some way. Like, I love it. And it's like, how did you have dude, they didn't even think I mean, it's clear that Microsoft didn't think much of Alan Wake at all. I mean, they sold it back to Remedy. You know, it's like, what are you doing?
That's insane.
How do you not realize that the certain things that work and it's just like they botched it. And I know people are gonna be like, you're such a PlayStation fanboy, but I'm like, no, man, this is like the prelude to, this was top of the world Xbox 360. PS3 wasn't even in the conversation. I was looking at the top 10 best-selling games in different territories around the world cumulatively, and it's like PS3 is nowhere in there. Uncharted Drake's Fortune was irrelevant that year compared to all the other games that came out, your Super Mario Galaxies, your Call of Duty Modern Warfares, and all the rest. So there's something so interesting about this because it's like the turning point of a very brief moment that I think lasted between Halo 2 and Halo 3 and a little bit after Halo 3, where Microsoft had their foot on Sony's throat and just didn't kill them.
Is that interesting? Is it what is that? You know what I mean? Is it like the lack of sort of vision or the lack of recognition is one thing. I think of Alan Wake. I never even heard of it before you were like, do you want to play this game? And then I looked into it and looked into the development and everything like that. I was like, this is fascinating. What do we have here? And I'm just broaching the surface. I'm just getting in, and it's pretty fascinating. But, is it that you think about 15 million copies of something? Is that the belly's too full? You're not hungry anymore? You're too comfortable? What's going on? There's no urgency. I don't know. There's a lot of people in a corporation like Microsoft paid a lot of money to be those visionaries and to carry the ball forward. You scored a touchdown, but you got to score a bunch more. You know what I mean? You're a corporation. You want to stay viable. You want to stay relevant. So it is that is always really interesting for me. But I do think a lot of that is just also divested really having divested interests, I guess you could say. You think of Sony as this multi-tendril technological giant, also involved in games and electronics and media and entertainment. And Microsoft's the same thing. Maybe divested a little differently, but they're involved in a lot of things with Bill Gates at the helm and all this kind of stuff. It's pretty fascinating. And listen, I'm an animator. I don't get a lot of this shit, but it is interesting when you think of, just like you saying, like it seemed like Xbox was winning, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was for sure. I think people that weren't playing or are too young for that era, PS3 really, really fell on its face. It was bad. And I always say that it's so funny that they were selling it at a loss so that the better it did, the worse Sony did, which was even worse. So it was hysterical. It was like a totally fucked up situation. And I remember people would sell shirts online that said like the PS3 logo and it said like 2006 to 2006 on it or whatever, PS3 2006 to 2007, whatever.
That's pretty funny.
That was literally what was happening. And of course, Xbox 360 beat them by a year to market. So they had an opportunity. And the Xbox 360 was a revolutionary machine with the way it dealt with the internet. It wasn't the first to use Xbox Live, of course, but it just was its removable hard drive and all the rest. It was very strange and interesting. And people were really taken by it. I would make the argument, and I've made this argument on some of the rounds I've done on Xbox podcasts, that the difference between, in my opinion, between Sony and Microsoft, and people can agree or disagree, is that I don't think Microsoft is a fundamentally creative company. Sony is a fundamentally creative company, like at its root, at its core. And people ask, well, what does that mean? And it's like, well, when Microsoft, I think, is made of 7 component parts or whatever, okay, and Xbox is their smallest part. It's about 6% of their business. And when you listen
is that
to
right?
Yeah, and when you listen to their financial calls and you read their financial statements, Xbox is sometimes not even asked about by they want to know about Azure, they want to know about Office, they want to know about Surface and all these things. Xbox is not a relevant brand to them right now. They want to make it more relevant. They're trying. They believe in gaming. They really should, because gaming is going to be huge, and they have such a huge advantage already with being with the Windows platform and everything. They need to make it work. But my argument is that Sony, on the other hand, the biggest part of Sony is PlayStation. And it's the exact opposite, right? It's literally the exact opposite. So when the first thing they talk about is PlayStation, the first thing they're asked about is PlayStation, they have to defend their creative decisions. And then what are 2 of the next 3 biggest parts of Sony? Movies,
right,
and TV and music. The other being consumer electronics, which in and of itself is another creative entity, I think, as well, because they have world-class design philosophies, and the execution of their machines is obviously well known going back to the post-war period. So
well said.
I just think that the companies are different, and people take offense to that. And I'm like, it's not a value judgment. It's about what you know how to do. And Microsoft knows how to make money on services. No one makes a better service than Microsoft. And that's what Game Pass has an advantage and why they might be able to fuse those two things together into something that's different. Sony is a creative company that makes movies, TV shows, has a music division. That's one of the big 3 music divisions. So they own, I think, one of the big 6 movie houses, one of the big 3 music houses, and the biggest video game brand. They're a creative company. So they know how to manage things better, just fundamentally. That's just true. That's why they didn't have to go out and buy all these random teams to put a conglomeration of things together that don't make any sense. They didn't have to go out and buy Call of Duty. They didn't have to go out and buy all these different things and Starfield and Bethesda and all that. I'm not saying that they couldn't or wouldn't or shouldn't. I'm just saying that they don't need to. They just fundamentally operate differently. And so I think that when I look at a company like Bungie, I mean, this is a little bit obtuse, but think about Rare, right? Rare was with Nintendo for all that time and then basically sold them to Microsoft. Microsoft was interested in getting a company that knew something. They didn't even care about culture. And they obviously did not import Rare's culture because it took them probably 3 generations to get any real value out of Rare. And I would say that it was Sea of Thieves that became the first game that actually came out of that studio that was like, okay, you made something finally, but their foundation was always, we're going to go, we need to build around this idea of finding the information, finding the expertise, finding the know-how to make these things happen. And so they just don't know how to do it like the others do. Nintendo says that when Nintendo's asked, like, do you want to expand your studios? And they're like, not really. I mean, because they say, like, you can't buy Nintendo culture. And that's a totally different way of looking at the creation of games. And Sony's somewhere probably in the middle of that. So when I look at a situation with Microsoft so I bring up Rare, they go and acquire Rare, they look at Bungie the same way. They're like, well, Bungie wants out and we're going to let them go. And it's like, what? Like, I don't understand. What are you talking about? You got to go and give them whatever they want. I don't understand what you're talking. You can't let them go.
Right. Make them happy.
Right. They don't want to make Halo anymore. So let them make something else. That something else was Destiny. You could have had it. Right. And you could have still made your Halo games for 343 and all of that stuff. So that's what I'm saying. They're transaction, or at least they were a highly transactional company where they're like, yeah, we just want Halo. We want the short win now and we'll let you go.
Oh, see.
And so short they agreed to make Halo 3 and ODST and Reach. And they're like, we're out. Just as agreed. Then Activision very wisely was like, we'll do business with you. And I say Bungie's a different kind of company. Bungie's with Sony now. And I've said since Sony bought them that I don't think this is the last stop for them either. They've been independent and owned by 3 different entities at this point. So I think they just go where they need to go and they have a lot of push and pull and action. But I look at it. So I guess what I'm saying in a circuitous way is I look at a company like Microsoft with seemingly an infinite number of resources at their disposal, especially compared to Sony. Yeah. Sony could never have made a deal like they made for Activision. Sony could have never even made a deal like they made for Bethesda without spending all their cash on hand, but they could have afforded Bethesda. But it's like, what do you really get out of that? This is a company that just bought Activision, which does $2 billion worth of profit a year for $70 billion, right? A massive overpay. So you would think, and that's great. You get it's like, whatever, but you let them go?
Yeah. That's
why didn't you
odd.
sit them down and say, like, what do you want? Do you want to make multi-platform games? Fine. Do you want to, do you want more money? Do you want more resources? That's what a creative entity would do. Could you imagine Sony ever letting Naughty Dog leave?
Right. You strike up, if somebody's unhappy, you strike up a compromise.
Right.
How can we all make out from this situation? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. At least historically, or back then, I can't help it, but it smacks of a philosophy of what you said, kind of short-term money over long-term plans and vision. And that's weird because there's so many dollars in those coffers anyway. It's like you're going for the short-term money. That's really odd.
And dig, what did they get? They got the short-term money and the long-term lack of gain. They used Bungie and let them go. They didn't manage Halo right. They didn't manage Gears. They didn't manage any of these things right. They didn't get anything new going. That's, I think, their biggest danger. That's why I think Starfield has been so important to them, is that finally there is a massive game that is not Halo or Gears of War. And something Gears hasn't really been big in years, So yeah, it's like something, and I think Gears is better than Halo, so I'm not insulting Gears. They're different. But yeah, they finally got something going.
Yeah.
And it is bad for them. It's like, what was the game they were relying on when Xbox launched? Halo. What game were they relying on when Xbox Series X launched? Halo. That's
now
no
something
good.
new is bubbling.
That's not going to work.
You know what? In layman's terms, I used to think about it, and you could speak to this, but it's a very elementary way of looking at things. And this is a much larger conversation for another time. But I really used to think the Sony versus Microsoft thing really more boiled down to an East versus West thing. You know what I mean? Like Eastern culture and philosophies and vision versus a Western thing. And it really is so much more complicated than that. The more I learn and the more I play games and then have to research on the games and the development and the publishing and the eras, the more I learn that that's part of it, but it's really a relatively small part of it. It really has to do with bigger things than that. It's fascinating for me because I'm still learning it. You know what I mean? You're so entrenched in it and so knowledgeable about this kind of thing, but it's really fascinating. It's a fascinating conversation, you know?
Yeah, it's you play a game like this and go back to that time and you're just like, how did we get here? That's so crazy. 15 million copies, 11. I think they sold 11 million in like 6 weeks.
I heard that. I read that. That's insane.
I mean, especially for that time. I mean, that's nuts. Especially the console at that point is only 2 years old. So you're really killing it. You're killing it. And yeah, I would love to know how they just botched it. They just botched it.
So
and
odd.
They let their competitor back in. They really could have. I don't know if they would have ever vanquished PlayStation. PlayStation's very gritty, hardcore fan base to this day. People were still playing PS3 by the millions, even when it was at its worst. But I think they really could have flipped the script so that you could imagine a situation where the Xbox brand is outselling PS5 by 2-1 instead of the other way around. Like, I think in some way you saw when Phil Spencer was on Kind of Funny and gave up what I thought was a very candid and surprisingly candid interview, where they seemed to resign to understand that they're not going to win. That like they need to figure out like a new front to fight on. But like I think they said something like, we're never going to out console Sony.
That is interesting.
And
to publicly,
it's like, yeah, but you did at one time.
Right. You were.
You certainly did. So and he was saying, and he admitted that Xbox One was just such a bad console for them that it was just the worst generation they could have possibly lost, because it became the first permanent generation, really, where PSN will always exist from that foundational point, and Xbox Live, as we understand it, although they have much more extensive backwards compatibility. So yeah, we're way off the topic, but I just I find that so interesting based on this game, because I look at this game as kind of the high watermark. It's certainly the high watermark for them commercially, as far as game sales are concerned. I don't know that Xbox ever released a game that sold this well ever again.
That's insane to think that. 2007, right? This culture, this era. And also, like, am I correct, Colin, saying like this 2007 perspective, Xbox, Halo 3, they had multiplayer and online play sewn up, like carrying off the success of how good Halo 2 was. But now with this,
yeah,
right? It wasn't even a contest.
Dude, Sony was absolutely, they were getting murdered on the online front. They were years behind. Years. Remember, trophies themselves were 3 years after achievements. I always bring up the story about how when you would buy digital games on PS3, when it first came out, it would open a browser on your. It wasn't even like a native thing you can do. It would open a browser and you had to use it was crazy. I mean, I would argue that Microsoft's expertise was more than a generation ahead at one point. And that kind of folded, I would say, during PS4. It became kind of moot, I would say.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
The one advantage PS3 had was that PS3's online was free, while you had to have Xbox Live to use the online functionality, gold or whatever, not silver or whatever, which would have just been logging in. So that, I think, gave PSN some level of viability. And then finally Sony turned on the spigot where they're like, well, now PS Plus is required for online play. But that didn't begin until they had dude, remember PSN went offline for 6 weeks. Remember that? I do.
How crazy is that?
God, that was good times on IGN PlayStation, though, man. We had so much to talk about at that time. I'll tell you what. And one of my most famous podcasts was the one that when PSN came back, and after 6 or 7 weeks, and we're like, oh my God, it's like, what happened? It's almost incredible that happened and they survived. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Wouldn't have that been a moment where it's like, well, we're going to win now? I mean,
right.
They just didn't have the games.
That is insane to think. Yeah, you couldn't take it at that point, right? You couldn't take the trophy at that point. It was probably never going to happen.
Let me see here. I'm trying to find best-selling list of Xbox 360 games. Okay. There's a Wikipedia article. So yeah, the best-selling Xbox 360 games were, there was like 4 Call of Duty games that it sold about as much as Halo 3 did.
That makes sense.
Skyrim.
Sure.
And then Minecraft was at 21 million, Grand Theft Auto 22.9, Connected Ventures 24 million, which is interesting.
Oh.
So yeah, these are numbers that are just, it's just so impressive. And they just, I don't know, man. Even Halo Reach sold 9.8 million, Halo 4, 9.4 million. Substantially more than Gears. Gears and Gears 2 each sold 5 million copies.
Wow.
And
that is interesting.
And Gears 3 million. So
wow. That's a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think they
huge.
They messed up somewhere along the line, but nonetheless, I want to talk a little bit about, if we can, in this non sequitur filled episode of KnockBack, go back to the story. I was curious if any of these settings specifically spoke to you. I mentioned earlier that I loved the whole visual of, so they're in New Mombasa in Africa, and I guess the Ark or like whatever is buried there. By the way, shout out to the connection of the original game where Cortana has the key or whatever from the original game for the Halo there, which was, I thought that was a super cool connection as well. But I loved the whole visual of this slip space, I guess, rift opening above where the Ark was, and everyone slips through and they end up finding themselves out of the galaxy entirely, which is incredible. I mean, intergalactic travel or leaving the galaxy is considered virtually impossible. I mean, that's not even, we don't even understand the fun, like the distances, how you would do that. I know Mass Effect Andromeda deals with that a little bit, but everything's literally, a galaxy far, far away in Star Wars, like where it's all, and there's plenty to work with in a galaxy of billions of stars and all these things. So I loved that. And I love when they look up at the sky and they see they see the Milky Way in the daytime sky, which I thought was so cool. I'm not entirely sure where they are. They're not in another galaxy because they're way too close to the Milky Way. So they're in some sort of intergalactic space. And I guess if I'm interpreting this correctly, and again, this goes back to the kind of the confusion I have with some parts of the story is,
yeah, me too.
I guess this was where the Forerunners went to manufacture and use the Halos safely, right? Because they're out of the galaxy.
Right.
So they can kind of witness it and then kind of jump back in when everyone's dead, with the flood primarily. I don't know if you understood it like that as well, but I wanted to ask you.
That makes sense.
What did you think of that whole, I loved that whole story arc of, they go back to a place that was really important in the second game. We know the aliens are obsessed with it. The Covenant's obsessed with this place for some reason. They don't understand why. I'm not entirely sure how they were I'm sure it's in something, but how they were directed to Earth, because the Covenant didn't even know where Earth was. Then they find that the Earth is really important. I guess it's important because the humans are the Forerunners, I think, right? So there's some sort of weird cyclical Battlestar Galactica thing there. And then yeah, they find themselves torn. We're the Earth is kind of in one of the spiral arms, so they're going in the opposite direction of the galactic center, and they find themselves in this place, I guess, where the rings are manufactured. I thought it was really cool, and I loved this part of the story. I wondered if this touched you or if anything else spoke to you.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's really beautiful world building. It's beautiful storytelling. It's something that I think pulls a lot of inspiration from various works of science fiction, but really is its own unique standalone thing, which I think is really, really cool. Like it's very, very well done, from soup to nuts. What I love about the story? I was confused about a lot of it. It had been a little while since we played Halo 2, so I had to sort of read and try to catch myself up. There's a lot going on in this thing. It's pretty complex, but I just love the set piece nature of seeing the giant ships, seeing the fleets, seeing that giant structure that you're driving on at the end. It's very fantastic, and it really makes me smile as a science fiction fan. It's beautifully realized. It's also really shown on a grand scale. The whole idea of the Halo is a really kind of a cool thing. I remember thinking before I played the Halo games, like, oh, that's like an artificial, it's a ring around a planet, but it's an artificial ring. It's a ring that they built It's not a ring made of ice and rock and all that kind of thing, which I always thought was a really, really cool idea, like this massive thing. We always thought of growing up as the Death Star being massive, but imagine a proper sized planet with this ring, you know. I always thought that was really, really kind of a
with
neat thing.
topography, like it's a ring that for somehow is Earth-like though. Like it's very weird.
It's really, it's like organic, but it's like it's, and again, a lot of it confuses me, but I love the visual components of everything. You know, it's just really, really beautiful and something that seems unique. You know, and I think it's one of the things that makes Halo so special, because again, I go on and on about how much fun I have with the games, but if you're into the science fiction storytelling component and just a good story with good characters and that sort of thing, and the substance, you know what I mean? You could come for that. You know, it has all of that. It's not contrived or hacked out or kind of thoughtless. None of that stuff is an afterthought. It has all the meat, you know, and I just kind of love that. But from a visual perspective, I guess growing up into Star Wars and the other iconic works of science fiction, it's so much more of that, and it does it in its own way. It uses that inspiration as fodder, but it's not copying any of the stuff that's come before. And I just think that's rare. I think that's a rare thing.
Yeah, it does feel unique. I love the visual. We talked about it. We don't get any of the shots, I don't think, really like we do in the first two, of being on the Halo and how cool that is when you're seeing it going up, and it's very unnatural as it goes behind you into the horizon. It's very, very cool. And I said when we did the original Halo, I remember in 2022 that I remember so well getting that game in 2003 and playing it and being on the surface of Halo. And it's like, wow, this is so cool. And I love sci-fi, and I love contrived sci-fi, and I love hard sci-fi, and I love all that kind of stuff. But this does feel unique. I don't think that the visual flair of it quite meets the potential of the story itself. I think that it's a little Jim Henson-y with some of the enemies, and like, I don't know. Mass Effect, I think, suffered the same way. I think it's really difficult to do aliens convincingly. Like, what are they? You think of in Mass Effect like the Hanar, and which is like the jellyfish creature, and all the different,
right.
You know, they do like a cool job of trying to imagine what it might be or what it might look like. Very similar. I think of like Suckass in Empire Strikes Back. Like his breathing box, apparently he breathes like methane or something. And so they try like in all these different things to envision, okay, different biologies, different looks, different needs for your bodies and all the rest. But I don't know. There's just something lacking about that the story is much cooler than the execution. Even the humans aren't very cool in this.
The story's hard to live up to, man.
Yeah.
Mass Effect's a great point of comparison, I think, for the art direction, right? I know exactly what you mean. It's like, let's make the aliens, they're kind of like part raptor, kind of like part insect, right? You're going to take all these pieces and sort of form this amalgamation. It seems like in that sort of station of science fiction, you're always pulling from the same places, and it feels a little... Yeah, it feels like the visual components don't hold up to how grand the story is, because the story and the storyline and the writing and the concept set a really high bar. And I think to match the art direction with that same sort of height of unique flavor, yeah, it's missing a little bit. It's not quite living up to the potential. I know exactly what you mean. It's a little samey visually.
Right. It reminds me of Star Trek, or even something like I liked these shows in the 90s and in the 2000s, like Babylon 5 and Farscape, where it's like, all right. Where in Star Wars, I think nails it, especially when you get out of A New Hope and you get into even the prequels, where it's like, yeah, this just feels a lot better. Not Dex at the diner, no, but other shit that just isn't quite as egregious as that particular character, or Jar Jar Binks or whatever. But like,
right.
When you think about the Gamorrean guards, you think about Bib Fortuna, you think about Bosk or whatever. I mean, this all just works a lot better. Like maybe we don't give Star Wars the appropriate credit that it feels like believable, grounded sci-fi, even though it's like the most unbelievable sci-fi. It's the furthest thing from hard sci-fi that exists, basically. So there is something to that, but I love religion in stories, as people know. And I wish that they just did it a little more credit. I mean, even when you see the Arbiter kill Truth, it seems a little anticlimactic because we've barely seen him. And I understand that there are prequel novels and stuff that you're supposed to read and comic books and shit. I'm like, dude, I'm not doing that. I'm
Is there
sorry.
all
Like,
the offshoot fiction?
right. There is
Okay.
like, there's a, I think like a visual novel series that takes place in between 2 and 3. And there's like a novelization of something and all the rest. And that's cool. And I appreciate that, but I'm not doing that. So it's a bummer for me. Like, I don't love Halo that much. I don't love almost anything that much. So it's a bummer to me that they didn't marinate more on the prophecy. Like, it's fascinating that the Covenant really believed something that was not true, or at least that we perceived as not true. I mean, wouldn't it have been interesting if the Covenant was right? I mean, that could have been a whole nother different way.
I love that.
Maybe the Halos are destroyed, but then you discover that actually they were lying. Like, you were being lied to about all these other things. And these, they could have done something different, but they never really spent enough time getting. And that's why, again, going back to what I said in the beginning with that Chris Ray Gun meme, I get it now. There was so much you would expect. Halo, all right, Halo 1, this foundational shooter, we do the best we can. Halo 2 gets like really, really deep. And so you expect Halo 3 to kind of be the Return of the Jedi of the trilogy. Like, let's get into it. And I just feel like they just skip over that. And that's a bummer, because the coolest component of Halo is playing it. The second coolest component of Halo is its story.
Yeah.
And
they dial it back.
Yeah, they really did they didn't do it justice, which is why I understand where people probably wanted more and demanded more, and they had more ideas in the prequels and blah, blah, blah. But you could have just ended this in a much more compelling way by spending maybe 45 minutes in cutscenes more than you do now. Or
So
even
true,
having,
man.
listen, 30 minutes of cutscenes, 15 minutes of corridor walking as you're listening to things. And you could have really fleshed it out, and it would have been great.
I think it's a great point, man. I very rarely walk away from a game thinking that it didn't have enough cutscenes, but I know some of the story still eludes me, and I'm missing complete beats, and I'm really there's Halo fans that are probably getting really mad at me right now, but the story, the concepts, and the ideas are so inspired. I mean, really among some of the best science fiction. I think it really would have been something. I mean, we're having a whole nother conversation right now. If you can also make the designs as original and influential as, let's say, Lucas did with Star Wars. If you brought all of that to the table somehow, I don't know how many more billions of dollars that could have cost, or what kind of godlike vision you could have had to do that. I'm not saying it's easy at all. But if you had all of those things working for you, dude, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, you really remind me. It's the storyline and what you have here, that, again, that the sort of bedrock that you're putting this all on is phenomenal. I mean, it really is. You got religion, you got the different races, you got all the infighting and the politics and who's right and who's wrong, and sort of looking at something from your own perspective. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of social dictation going on there. There's a lot of philosophical doctrine we talked about in the second one. There really is a lot. It was surprising to see them kind of pull back, or maybe the story is just resolving. So the complex stuff and the complicated bit, we're past that now. I don't know. I don't really know. Maybe it's a combination of both of those things.
Yeah, I want to know what happens from here, because this seems somewhat resolved. Like, the Covenant is defeated, presumably. Maybe they're going to do some Star Wars shit where it's like the Covenant exists and there's a flotilla, somewhere. But and then it seems like the civil warriors, so those that defected, are at peace with the humans, though an uneasy peace, and they kind of bounce. So I'm not even really sure where you go from here. That's why I think they should
love your idea, Kyle, of letting the audience think Master Chief's dead too. Like, why not do that? And then surprise people, then really keep a tight seal on that. Really no leaks. Then come back out with your next iteration, and all of a sudden this big reveal. It's almost as big, again, bringing it back to Star Wars, as, I am your father. I mean, that's a big fucking deal. Why not do that? That would have been amazing. I don't know if they were just afraid of the backlash of like killing this beloved, iconic hero, but then again, that I don't even know. Like that's a miss for me. That's an egregious miss.
Yeah, and I dig different endings for for difficulty levels where you could have maybe done a little tease, a float, like
Love that.
just
Absolutely
and
love that.
well, let me ask you this before I forget. We touched on it earlier. So what's going on with Master Chief and Cortana? Like, what are they trying to? And I don't even mean this in a facetious way or a skeevy way. It's like, what are we trying to say about these characters? Do they love each other? Like, she loves him, it seems like, but it seems like he loves her too. What do you make of that? Did that come through to you too, or am I just like senile?
I actually got a little misty at the end where she's like, or the whole "you came back for me" moment, or that type of thing, or "I chose you." And I was like getting a little emotional, and I was like, "Why?" And then I thought of that Peter Pan Tink dynamic, and then I thought they were kind of subtly, not so subtly hinting that there's a romantic thing there, but she's AI. So then I was thinking like Spike Jonze her, but like Spike Jonze her came after. So I'm thinking about all these things where that story was being told, like in that case, it was Joaquin Phoenix being in love with some disembodied voice, but, again, it's Scarlett Johansson's voice. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. It was interesting that it's kind of like these two, I don't want to say vapid, like vacuous kind of non-character characters. And all of a sudden you're very concerned about their relationship. Maybe it was this kind of thing where they needed each other. What do you call that type of relationship? Give me the word.
Codependent
Type of relationship where it was like this thing where they made up, they kind of brought up that like any good relationship, they form a whole together. They need each other. Is this, it was really interesting the way it ended. You know what also I loved, before I forget to say, I liked those sort of Cortana glitches or hallucinations in the beginning that you're seeing. I thought that was really neat. But I also thought that was really cool as a marker for progression. Like you knew you were going the right way. Again, very light exploration. You couldn't really get lost. But that was a nice inventive way to say you're on the right track.
Totally. Love that. I agree with you. Because there's a much more obvious thing too, is just looking for checkmark notifications, which usually lets you know you're going in the right direction too. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Little things like that. Because I do think that the game, it's almost funny to me that the game has a radar on the HUD, which is another busy part. It's like, you're not telling me much of anything. I don't know that I even need this. I use it maybe once in a blue moon. If it's like there's an enemy stuck somewhere and something's not continuing, and I realize that, there's a brute stuck behind a pillar or something. But other than that, I was I love that, because I was again a little confused about where I was going sometimes. But I think that comes from the nature of these big worlds. It's not a tight linear corridor shooter by any stretch of the imagination. Although I think that there's a place for those too, and I love those as well. But this game is much bigger than that. And that's one of the things I really dig about the sandbox as you're playing in it. I was showing this to Micah actually, which was, I appreciated that the game is rendering really far away. And you could and it doesn't really make any sense because bullets curve to the ground. By the time you hear a bullet coming out of a gun, apparently it's already in the ground, which is so interesting. Because they move so quickly and they just arc down and just go. So it doesn't make sense that this happens, but I like in the game that you could be very far from something, aim at it. So think if you're like you're running away from a scarab and you're really far away from it, you can still shoot at it and hit it. And they're tracking all of that stuff from great distances, which is appreciated. It means you can play the game in lots of different ways with lots of the different weapons. I did feel like there were fewer weapons in this game. Did you feel that too?
Yeah, I feel like,
which is fine, but I felt like I didn't see very many weapons this time around.
Yeah, there was some new stuff that was fun. We talked about the vibro axe. We talked, there's some other good. I wrote a couple down that I thought were standouts. But yeah, I felt like they kind of simplified a little bit, and I don't know if that's just the impression or if that's real. They had the flamethrower. We talked about that. I like the fuel rod cannon. That was cool. The few times you got it, I was picking the Space Command weapons over the Covenant weapons more.
Oh yeah, me too.
There were really no reason. Unless I'm thinking of one or two that were okay, but the overheating weapons were just sort of a non-issue. I was like, that was too much of a cross to bear. I was completely over that by the time this started. In fact, it was kind of interesting that they offered that again, because I think it's a pretty frustrating mechanic. I don't like it. But yeah, I think it's interesting when you say like the visual component and seeing things rendered from far away, because in the cutscenes, but especially real-time gameplay, again, some of those set piece, those vistas of just looking out and seeing the ships in the distance or a squadron or a fleet, kind of half covered with the clouds or the mist, or high up to get a sense of that vertical dynamic nature of this world, or the way the sky looked, or seeing a certain sort of really sort of, I don't know, exotic piece of architecture in the distance. Really immersive. And that's what I mean about the story. I get more confused about the story, but I just love the sort of visual components in that world building and just creating an atmosphere. I think that's the thing. Some of it's we talk about the architecture being a little too Stargatey and maybe a little too generic, and more insect alien creatures. We've seen that 100 times, but there is something very special about the immersive nature of the worlds, of the levels, and that atmosphere. That makes it really enjoyable, especially when it's something, by the time it comes to an end, in less than a dozen hours, you're like, I'm going to miss this. You know what I mean? There's just something, I don't want to leave this world. I was having a good time here. There's something really about that, and I think there might be something about this, Kyle, that's going on with me right now, being late in my 40s, where it's like, I play these games. We talk about them for the various podcasts. So much fun. I think there's a part of me that doesn't want the complex nature of a story. Like, in other words, I'd rather save that for movie night. I'm at this point in my life where I just want the game to be fun. I'm not talking about that it has to be as lacking in content as like a Miss Pac-Man, but I'm really on board to have a good time playing something and be immersed in a world, And I think that's the thing about, I don't mean to be underselling the story, because it's a really important part of, I think, what makes Halo so successful. But yeah, I think that there's something going on in my life where it's like, yeah, okay, like this is just what you're looking for in your recreation time right now.
Right. Yeah. Gameplay. That's why I think Doom 2016 is right up your alley, because
that sounds fun.
That's no story basically compared to this. So, and that's just fun, crazy gameplay. So maybe we'll get to that at some point soon. But yeah, I think there's a lot to love about Halo 3. I think it's probably, I think it's better than Halo 1, but I don't think it's better than Halo 2 in my opinion. But I am happy that I finally played it. It was a huge hole in my gaming repertoire. I'm glad I was able to explain why that is. At the time, really, by all rights, we used to get sleeves of games from developers and publishers. When games come to stores, they come in big boxes, but then sleeves of closed boxes. I think there's 18 of them in there or whatever. And we used to get sleeves of games so that we can all take one and play them. And I remember that for Call of Duty and all these other games. And Halo 3 was one of them. And I just didn't have the time, the inclination, the machine played at the time. And then it came and went. But I remember it being such a phenomenon. So to be able to close that loop in my own life is great. And I think that the game is really, really good, and certainly a time well spent. Games it's as you're saying, games very, very rarely make me feel, by the time I get to the end, that I'm wanting more. I'm ready for games to be over, not because I don't like them, but because they kind of naturally come to a conclusion. So yeah, for a game, especially by modern standards, to kind of not stick around very long is nice.
Yeah.
And I dig it. It's all about the quality, not the quantity of the gameplay. I think people just have lost sight of that over time. There's no game I want to play for 100 hours, pretty much ever. So I don't want to say that I'm like looking for that kind of game, but I think a game that takes 8 or 10 hours, whatever this was, I thought was brilliant. Is there anything else you wanted to say about Halo 3?
I mean, I would just say, if anybody was under the rock with me and hadn't played this game, highly recommend it. Again, because it is that brisk sort of enjoyment of just a 8 to 10 hour thing. It's kind of there's low cost for entry. You could just really enjoy it in a day or two, maybe a weekend, if you really want to take your time with it. It's so much fun. It's just so nice when we do these topics for KnockBack, just to be part of the conversation of something big. But I find it very gratifying when we're talking about something not only big, but something so universally beloved, that not only now do you have some context, do I have a point of reference, but I could see and agree with why everybody loves it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, I get it. And I don't know, it makes me feel closer to my fellow human. It's almost like that Sopranos or that Game of Thrones dynamic. It's like, why does everybody love this? Then you sit down and watch, you're like, oh yeah, I get it. And it seems to be the general consensus that we all love this thing. There's just something about, and I guess in times, and maybe all times are like this, where it feels like people are generally at odds, that we could agree on something like this. It's kind of neat.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, I get it. We're in the know now. We do agree. Like I have to concur with everybody. This is one of those great things. And the ending, man. I love the send up to the ending of the first one. And I just love that I felt myself smiling from ear to ear as I was playing it, as those sort of panels were collapsing into space and you're driving your warthog.
God, that was so fun, dude.
This
It
is
was so fun.
I was just like, this is how you do fun in a game. This is a model of just how you make a game fun.
Mm-hmm.
And why we game. It's an experience. You know,
Yeah,
I love how it all culminates in that moment too, of that 10 minutes of gameplay where it's like, and that echoes really how the game felt as a whole. It's like, this was really fun. I'm really glad I spent 10 hours with this because I enjoyed myself.
Yeah, I love
That's
what you're
all
saying.
You could want out of it.
I was totally self-aware in the moment that I was having a great time when I was doing the ending. Like, wow, you're so engaged in this. I remember thinking that as I was playing. So it's funny that we had a very similar experience with it, but that's not, I guess, super uncommon. It's good to add this to the repertoire. We're much further, we're much further in the sunlight than under the rock now as we get out of our Halo
for
dormancy here.
At least for me, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm really, my relevancy with Xbox is long over by this era of Xbox. So there's still, but I was reflecting on Sacred Symbols that really realistically there are probably, I mean, honestly, fewer than 10 games that we're missing that would catch us all the way up on Xbox when you really think about it from a purely quality game standard. The Halo games, the Gears games. I don't care about Forza or anything. I'm not including that.
Plays.
Yeah. So we'll get to all those. I think we should just finish Halo first and then we'll just do Gears after that. But
yeah, that sounds fun.
But Dag, let's end it there. That was a good conversation about Halo 3. Remember, you guys can play it on PC like Dagan is, or play it on your Xbox console, I think all the way back to, let's see, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and then Xbox Series, although the Master Chief Collection has many more games than that. And I think I bought it for $40. It's on Game Pass, which I'm sure is great if you have Game Pass. I don't, but $40 well spent. I mean,
it's a good buy.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's Halo 1, 2, it's Halo Anniversary, 2, 3, Reach, 4, and ODST, I think. So that's pretty nice. 6 games. Yeah, pretty nice. All right, Dag, let's end with a dad joke, as we always do.
All right, I was tempted to read one of our cards here, but somebody sent me a joke. I'm not sure if it was on Twitter or Instagram, but I thought it was really funny. But it was kind of this visual joke, but I think I could I'll put it into words. If I fail, then I'll read a card. Okay. Kyle, guy goes to a beekeeper, asks for a dozen bees. Beekeeper hands over a bag of bees. There's 13 in there. Customer says, you know what? I asked for a dozen. You gave me an extra. Beekeeper says, yeah, that's a freebie.
That's great.
I love that one.
I was with Dana and Allie, Declan, Derek, Jonathan, and Micah this past weekend. We went and saw the Gin Blossoms live.
Oh yeah, how was that?
And it was awesome. And Sugar Ray, we had great seats. We were like 12 rows back. It was awesome.
Oh shit.
And they were saying, we were hanging out beforehand, and they had some funny dad jokes they were going to send you. I'm like, you got to send those to Dagan. So I'll have to prod them.
Please do.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great, dude. I have such a man crush on Mark McGrath. He's just so cool, you know, and he's so fun and he's so nice.
You were in range.
Oh, we were pretty close, but yeah, nothing.
You should have threw your panties up there.
Yeah, I was showing.
That's still a thing.
I saw that Drake released a picture of him with all of the bras that women have thrown on stage, or whatever. He's like saved them all, I guess. Like, that's so weird.
That is so funny.
All right, my friend, let's get out of here. Dag, I appreciate your time. Thank you for playing Halo 3 with me. We'll see you next time.
Had a blast.
And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Last Stand Media, KnockBack, etc. Remember, you can find many, many conversations going back years with Dagan and I on free feeds, on YouTube, etc. And we'll get back to Halo shortly and other games as well. Alan Wake will be over on Sacred Plus in preparation for Alan Wake 2, so look forward to that as well. We'll see you next time for more. Until then, goodbye. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.